everyone who's, the commissioners who are coming are all here. So I'll call the meeting to order. Let's do a roll call.
Sure. Ms. Wells,
Here.
Mr. Witherspoon,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Mancini.
Here.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
and Mr. Schulman.
Here.
Okay, that is 4 of 6. You're good to go.
Okay.
Or 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 7. Right. As a courtesy, Attorney Suchi has asked if we could place the Norwalk Housing Ventures later in the agenda. She apparently has a presentation in Wilton. We're happy to do that. So the first item of business will be 2021-12R Zoning Commission proposed text amendment to Article 101 Workforce Housing Regulations of the Building Zone Regulation. In the event that there's anyone here who has not attended one of our public hearings before, let me explain how it works. First, a presentation will be made by the representative of either the firm or the organization that has requested the public hearing. During the presentation, if members of the commission have questions, feel free to ask them. Once the presentation is completed, we will open the hearing up to the public for public comment. We do not place time constraints on how long you can speak on a matter, but you only have one opportunity to speak. So we encourage you, if you're going to speak for or against the matter at hand, please make sure that you include everything that you wish to say. We ask that you keep it polite. We will do the same at our end. If it gets out of control, we will mute you and will not permit you to continue speaking. So pretty straightforward rules. Once the public has had their say, again, the representative will have an opportunity to respond to the comments that have been made by the public. And then we will move on to the next public hearing. After all 3 public hearings have concluded, depending on the amount of information to decide whether to approve the matter, deny the matter, or extend the meeting, either to hear additional comment or to vote on the matter at a later meeting. Pretty simple rules. I believe that Mr. Kleppen is going to make the initial presentation on the proposed amendment to 101. When he completes, Brian Baker will explain how members of the public can indicate that they wish to speak. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kleppen.
Sure. And I'm going to put a little presentation together just for the benefit for perhaps for the commission as well as the public, so we can hopefully that walks you through it a little bit. Okay, can you guys all see that? Thumbs up from somebody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of background on the workforce housing program and the intent of it. So the regulation was adopted in 1987. The regulation is meant and kind of mirrors Connecticut General Statute 8-30G, which is a statute that requires all municipalities in the state of Connecticut to have at least 10% of their housing stock affordable to families that pay no more than 30% of their income, which includes utilities, towards housing. And so that program's been around a little bit, for quite a while now. Norwalk itself, yes, I said, mentioned, adopted these regulations in 1987. It's not meant to provide all the answers to all the affordable housing problems in a community, but is meant to really address the workforce issues. And ideally it would be set up to target police, teachers, municipal staff. That's kind of like the target when a lot of communities look at these kind of regulations. Some background on state median income, which is something that gets factored into the calculations of workforce housing regulations. 2020, the state median income for a family of 4 in Connecticut was $99,700. 80% of that, which is what 830G is based off of, is $79,760. And so 60% of that, and that comes into play with one of the regulations we'll be talking about a little later on, is $59,820. And that's just about the starting salary for some of my newer folks who've come on board in the last years, just to give you a flavor of who's kind of eligible for those funds and the kind of work that they do. Just to give you a little bit of flavor of some other numbers, the area median income, which is Norwalk, Stamford, Bridgeport corridor, including obviously the other Fairfield County towns, is $143,400. So there's a big difference between state median income and area median income, just for reference point. Also, to give you another little bit of information on what we would be talking about. So rent for a single person in a 1-bedroom at 60% of state median income, which would include utilities, would equate to a rent of about $981 a month, where without this, that would be $1,121. Right now, Norwalk is at about 13.1%. That was our last reporting of our housing stock, fits into that 830G compliant category. And we've permitted just about 500 workforce housing units since 1987 as part of that program. Now, there are other units that are not included in that 499, which would be units that might be owned and managed by the Norwalk Housing Authority and other nonprofit, housing, affordable housing developers who are kind of a different cohort, but they would count towards that 13%. But the 499 just represents the workforce housing units approved since 1987. There are 2 provisions in the existing regulations which have never been utilized since that regulation was adopted. One is a fee in lieu option, and there's also an affordable housing bonus provision that's been put in, but no one has ever taken advantage of either of those. So why are we doing this, and what's kind of the purpose of this amendment now? Trying to make some of the rules consistent throughout the city, excuse me. Right now, the regulations are not consistent. So in one area, there are different thresholds of affordability in terms of the 80%, what you can do, versus some areas which could go down to 60%. Some of the areas don't actually require workforce housing now. Some areas have triggers when you get to developments of 12 units or more, and some areas it kicks in when you're at 20 units or more. So it should be an even playing field across the city for whomever is developing affordable housing. We learned a few years ago when we did rezoning in South Norwalk and also in West Ave Wall Street, is that a lot of the school kids don't, the highest percent don't come from mixed use, multifamily developments. That's kind of one of the crying themes about don't build any more housing because you're adding kids. While it's true that those developments do add kids, a higher percentage come from smaller developments than come from the larger developments. As I stated earlier on, this just really addresses one segment of the affordable housing cohort. It does not capture all those. It does not get at the folks on a much lower income that need assistance from, whether it's local, state, or federal assistance. Something else to, kind of put on your radar, the state of Connecticut does have a statute that requires all municipalities to have an affordable housing plan. The next one is due in the fall of 2022. I don't know if you've met Laura Kenny yet. She's new to the staff. She's the senior planner. She is actually putting the framework together for a housing plan. We'll be having some conversations, and we'll circle back with you on that as we start to develop that a little further. That's something else to keep in mind. And it goes much further beyond the workforce housing. It's kind of meant to be the comprehensive housing, affordable housing plan for the city. So the impacts of the new changes, I don't think it really affects any of the larger developments like the ones you're currently looking at in South Norwalk, or perhaps even what we've suggested up at North 7. The impact changes, I think, would be on the smaller developments. So the regulation recommends, and we'll go through this, the regulation, and go as slowly through it as you'd like. It drops the threshold down to 10 units or more. So if you're putting in a multifamily development of 10 or more units, you have to comply with the workforce housing regulation. Doesn't matter what zone you're in. If you're doing 10 or more units, you have to comply. And if you're doing a multifamily development, which our regulations define as 3 units or more, but you're less than 10 units, you have the option of designating one of those units as a workforce unit or paying a fee. And the fee structure is $10 per $1,000 of construction value. So some recent projects that have been approved and developed, those are listed there. And as you can see, the fee is not really large. So just one thing I'd like to point out, and I think it was in a correspondence that you received, was the referral from the Planning Commission, who voted unanimously, I believe unanimously, to authorize the amendment, but they did have concerns that the fee was too low. So, obviously, if you double the fee, that would double the cost on those developments. This fee is just, I look at it as just another tool in the toolbox to address the affordable housing issue. It's not meant to solve all that. So my recommendation would be to leave it at that fee, but I'm happy to have that discussion with you as we move forward. So, and the fee is really meant to collect over time. It's meant to, it could be used for land acquisition. If an affordable housing developer was looking to purchase property, they could use that for soft costs, say, architectural engineering firms, because those costs don't get any cheaper, whether you're building affordable housing or whether you're doing market rate housing. So in 2018 and 2019, respectively, we rezoned South Norwalk in and around the train station, and 2019 was in the West Ave Wall Street corridor. So we've made some pretty significant changes to the workforce housing regulations. As a part of that, we dropped down the units from 20 to 12, and we looked at the affordability and provided 2 options. One was if you stayed at 80% state median income for those units, you, in addition to the 10% units, you also had to pay that fee, that same fee structure that you saw before. And so far, there's been 3 projects approved, 2 in South Norwalk, and the Pinnacle was the last one approved under that, that have opted to pay the fee. Right now, the only fee that's been collected, just because that's the only project that's been done, was a partial fee on the 121, 123 Water Street project, which was the Frank Rich project, which I think is called Harborside Sono. So they paid a fee on a portion of that, because some of you may recall that project was initially approved prior to the change in the zone in South Norwalk. So they paid a fee on the new units that were added in the second phase of that. So another question that came up, so we're about to, we're just beginning to update the zoning regulations. And so why not just wait to do that until the regulations have been adopted? I did speak with the consultant about that and any other changes, and their position basically was, look, if it's a brand new initiative or something you haven't brought up before, their preference would be to wait. But if it's something that you've already got on the books and it's, you know, in this case, I said, you know, we already have an existing policy and we're just simply modifying that policy. They didn't have any conflict with that. And I don't think it would have any material changes on the broader rezoning that we discussed. And then, you know, again, when we're in that process and this issue comes up, we can always adjust it and modify the regulation if we come up with some better rules and some better standards to apply. Just to give you a sense of what some other towns are doing. New Canaan, which is really what this was modeled of, because that was my place of former employment. They apply the same formula of $10 per thousand of construction value. They do apply that to all residential construction, including single family. So since 2008, they've collected nearly $5 million on those fees. And that's gone to fund several housing authority projects in that community. Fairfield adopted a fee in 2018. Theirs is lower than what we're proposing. Theirs is $5 per $1,000 of construction. And they've collected nearly $1 million since 2018. So it does add up over time.
Is Fairfields on all residential construction like New Canaan, or?
I believe so. And I, as far as I could tell, I did some other inquiries. I couldn't find another town that has done a fee like ours. And I mentioned a little bit, there were 3 projects approved. 2 of them are under construction, so they haven't paid the fee yet. But you know, those fees will get collected when those projects come in. The one thing that the Planning Commission brought up, which I thought was a really good point, was, you know, we didn't quite iron out the requisition process. So say there's $3 million in that fund at some point. Somebody wants to use that fund. There wasn't really a process in place to how someone could request the funds. So I've been working with Corporation Counsel on that. I think we can have a resolution on that, you know, well before there's really any significant funds in that account. My suggestion was somebody makes a request to the zoning commission that they have a project where they want to develop affordable housing and they'd like to use some of the funds or all the funds in there for a certain cost. They make a request to the zoning commission, and then the zoning commission makes a referral to the legislative bodies on withdrawing those funds. But I am, like I said, I am working with Corporation Counsel on finalizing that process. What you see on the screen here are, I think, what I highlighted a little earlier, which were the main changes from the existing workforce housing regulations. I highlighted the developments that are from the 3 to 9 unit size, and they would now be either they have the choice. They could pay a fee. I would assume most people are going to want to pay the fee versus add a unit or designate a unit as a workforce unit. And the second part is before we always required everybody to round up. So if you did, say the threshold where you were building was 20 units or more, and your development was 22 units, you would have to designate 3 of those units as workforce units. Under this provision, which was 3C on the screen, you could designate 2 units, and then on that 0.2 unit, you could make a payment on that fraction, which I think most people would probably take an advantage of going forward. I think that helps them out a little bit. And there's also an existing issue that came up. So say you already had a project that was not subject to workforce housing, say it was built in 1965, for example. If you already had, say, 30 units on the property and you wanted to add 10 more, you wouldn't have to pay the workforce units, or excuse me, provide the workforce units on the existing 30, just the 10 new units that you're providing. And I think that's fair and, might alleviate some of the concerns that were brought up. You did get a letter from Attorney Waters from Building, Land and Technology, and he had some concerns about the existing and ongoing administration of the workforce units. We did have a conversation, he and I, about that. And I think he brought up some really fair points about that. I don't know if I think the city should be doing the verification on all the income requirements, because we already do that now. All the workforce units, any development that has workforce units, I should say, are required to provide documentation to the city annually on those workforce units, including income verification and all the other requirements that we have to provide, if we're ever audited by the state as part of the 830G program. So, but I do think it would make sense if the city was the repository for all available units, because we already have a breakdown of where those units are. And I'm having my staff actually map those now, and as soon as that map is done, I'll share that with everybody, because it's, I think it'll match up with some of the things we're talking about planning wise. But I think it would be good if the city or a quasi-city agency was able to be the kind of clearinghouse for those units. Right now, like I said, the workforce projects or workforce properties need to report those to us annually. So I think maybe that we'd have to come up with a mechanism where monthly or bi-monthly, they have to tell us what units are available. So that way, if somebody's looking for one of these workforce units, we could say, okay, we have 6 properties in town that have vacancies. We have a 2-bedroom over here, a studio in this unit. So people get a sense of what's available. But I think that, to me, that at least that portion of it makes sense to have the city administer. And we could also look at the other parts of it. As I mentioned, Laura Kenny, the new senior planner, one of her tasks is housing planning. I haven't discussed this with her yet. We do have a call coming up with Adam Belvilsky from the Housing Authority. So this is something else we could broach with him, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it as well. And I think that's it for the presentation. Happy to take questions from you before we turn it over to the public.
Steve, I'm not sure that this is a place for this question, but we've always put this burden exclusively on the shoulders of those who want to build housing in Norwalk. It seems to me that the entire community benefits from the availability of workforce housing. And why should we not apply this fee to all significant construction in the city? If a company wants to put up a headquarters building and it's a $10-20 million project, why shouldn't we also collect a fee from them that goes toward affordable housing?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I've got a good answer. For me, why the text as it currently stands, at least from the staff level was proposed, is I would consider it low-hanging fruit. I think that's a broader philosophical discussion, and I think we should have it, but I just don't know if I've got, I think we should do some outreach and conversations with those folks as part of this. I know when we were doing the citywide plan, we did talk to, a lot of the large business owners and a couple of the Merit 7 business owners, specifically talking about where their, issues were with staffing and concerns they had about commute times for, their back end staff, because, they have to drive down the Merit or on 95 at 7:30 in the morning, and anybody who does that knows it's quite a parking lot, and it's post-COVID, it's right back to the way it was. It's bad. So their back office staff, some of the times they're moving those operations up the line to Stratford or other places because they're, that's where their workforce for those positions are coming from. So it's easier for them maybe to do those things. And I don't know, and you could make the argument that there are negative economic consequences for the city by having those kind of things happen, let alone forgetting the environmental issues about the commute part. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but that's what I'm doing.
Steve, are you worried about discouraging smaller developments with the smaller units, with the fee on the smaller units? Although the fee is a little bit nominal now, so.
I don't think the fee, how it's structured now, will. I mean, just based on what the numbers that I put up on the screen, I think they're kind of small.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things. I think Attorney Waters' point about the administrative part of it, I think is a fair point. But I mean, if there are, enough units within your portfolio, there are a lot of firms that do the management part of it. And I would think that maybe there would be somebody that would realize that, this guy's only got 1 or 2 units, that it's something they could handle. But I'm happy to have that, look into it more, and any way that we on the city if there are, similar, if there are agencies within the city that are doing similar kind of things now, and that's something that we can add to that without, adding staff or workload, I think that's something we should look at.
Makes sense. I just wouldn't want to discourage some of the smaller.
No,
Um,
and I don't, we don't want to do that either.
Steve, have we looked at any like research from like neighboring states, like, Massachusetts or Jersey, and see how they may be doing this with their like units?
No, we did not, no. Everything was based off our existing workforce regulations and then what our peer communities are. I know Massachusetts has our language in terms of some statutory authority mimics Massachusetts fairly well. I mean, we can look into those, that's something we can do.
Steve, I just want to just make this clear on the record here, because I'm looking at Attorney Waters' letter, which is a very thorough letter, and Attorney Waters is as experienced as they come, and certainly more experienced than me. But his main criticism isn't even the right word. I mean, his main observations really have nothing to do with the actual proposed regulation. It has to do with what happens next. So his objection doesn't appear to be in terms of the language of the resolution or the policy at all. It's just about the administration and actually the implementation of the proposed policy. Is that fair to say?
I think that's, yeah, and he did, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but we did state something similar to me. I always know, Dory Wilson had handled the, accounting and reporting on the workforce units up until she retired. And I always
Right.
knew that sometimes there were little hiccups here and there on reporting because, Attorney Waters points out, their property up at Merit 7, even the existing buildings under construction, they've got enough units in there so they can have an outside agency handle that aspect
Sure.
of it. So I was never aware that there were significant issues with the reporting. I'm obviously with any kind of mandate that we require, it's additional time and money on their part. So, I know that that's, if they can avoid that, I'm sure they would prefer to.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is this isn't even. I do not read this as opposition to your proposal. I read this as something that we need to think about in terms of making sure that a program like this is effective, and not about an objection to the program itself, I guess is what I'm just trying to parse out here.
Yep, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Any other questions at the moment from commission members?
Steve, what's your view on the percentage? Would you leave it? Would you
Which
increase it?
percent?
The fee percentage?
I thought,
I would, my gut's telling me to leave it. I had one of the planning commissioners he ran a different analysis on where he thought it should be like based on what he did was, and I could dig the email out and pull it up. What he did was he pulled out the, the rents, market rent versus what the rent would be at the different, doesn't really matter if it's 60 or 80% SMI. So he said, this is the loss to the property owner over a 5-year time span. And he said that he based it off a 5-year sum. So I thought that, it was an interesting way to look at it. So the fees would go from whatever it was, maybe 25,000 versus the 6 or 7. So, I mean, even 25,000 is not a huge number in the grand scheme of things, but, based on also what Attorney Waters said, there's probably going to be additional time and cost on the administrative end, especially at the beginning of this for them that they probably didn't have to worry about before. So maybe my gut's saying leave it as it is, but I mean, it's something we can evaluate going forward. And, as part of the broader zoning rewrite, we can look at it and say, what, we can look at, and say, here's the problems we've seen. Or maybe there are no problems and maybe the fee's not effective enough, and then reevaluate it at that point.
well, and I guess the question would be, and you said that you did this and that this was something that was implemented in New Canaan. And I guess my question would be is whether developers looked at the fee and thought, okay, this is like a little bit of a speeding ticket, as opposed to something that actually, is a real disincentive for them to not comply. And I have not seen anything, that's been presented that really kind of delves into whether developers look at that and say, all right, we really do have to actually do this, or they turn around and say, you know what, we might as well just pay the fee and just do what we want to do. So I don't know where you are. I guess my question is incentives more than the number itself. Like, and maybe mine and Nick's question are just one and the same. But what are in your opinion, what are developers most likely to do when they see this fee number?
Yeah, assuming my math is not way off, I don't think that, somebody having to write a one-time check for $6,000 on a project is going to deter them from any future development. I don't think that's the case. I mean, when we enacted it in New Canaan, there was lots of screams and yells at first, but then it's just part of doing business. And, it's, something else just to keep in mind though, say that the fee is $6,000 and then they have whatever their annual fee is for if they hire somebody to do their monitoring and accounting on the workforce units that they manage, that fee is going to get passed on to somebody. So that's going to be reflected in somebody's rent at another building or on the sites. Just something else to keep in mind. Somebody besides them is more than likely going to pay for it. That's just the way that, same thing when lumber cost goes up. The guy the end user is going to pay for it, not the developer.
Is that the argument? Is that the argument to do the fee, or is that the argument not to do the fee? I'm not entirely sure there.
I mean, there's always a cost. I mean, I don't know a way to do this without there being a cost. At some point, it's going to get passed on. And it's the larger projects, it's more incremental and spread out over a broader pool than it is over the smaller ones. It's just. But again, that's why I would argue for keeping the fee low, at least for now.
Any other questions?
I'm only stuck on the issue of there is a fee. It makes sense on the surface why there is a fee. But if the fee gets passed off to the consumer, but we're also using the fee to help bridge the gap in affordable housing, then is it a wash? I guess my question is, if you're collecting a fee, which I don't have an objection to there being a fee, where is it going to go, right? And how does it actually increase, and satisfy the huge need for affordable housing instead of it being passed on, to rents and the money doesn't get effectively spent? I don't know if I'm.
I think the thing you're articulating is the risk with inclusionary housing requirements.
Right.
Of when does it get too expensive that developers either stop developing or completely, or do weird things to bypass it, right? Okay, I can do 10 3-unit things and not do the 10-unit thing because I don't want to pay the one thing. I mean, the size that we're dealing with is smaller than what I think is other places have done that have had issues with inclusionary housing. But I think that's the thing you're not struggling with, but the question that I think we should be grappling with is are we going to what are the potential negative consequences to this, and are seen and unseen?
My sense is that these fees are nominal, and that they're not going to have great impact on the renters, and they're not going to have great impact on the developers, and that we seem to be getting hung up on what is really a very small matter. Again, you're talking about money. I guess money is never a small matter. But if you looked at the fee examples that Steve gave, they were nominal in terms of the size of these projects, and I don't think they're going to have a significant impact.
Well,
on the other side, they're also not going to have a tremendous impact on helping us to build affordable housing.
Right.
They may have some impact.
Well,
And there's a trade-off there.
They're like, so I don't think these small projects, if you're building 8 units are going to have a big impact on that financial pool. The larger projects that opt for that will make a bigger dent, 10 times that at least. I think one thing, and you have an application in front of you tonight for, looking at a density incentive that we put in. I think if you look at the rezoning that we've done since 2019, and I think it's been very targeted, and unlike, it's not, willy-nilly all over the city. We've identified areas where based on the citywide plan, where we feel that the city should grow. And, that's one of those is South Norwalk near the train station. One was in the West Ave Wall Street corridor. And also, East Norwalk's another area that we identified for some modest growth. As part of that, we allowed the density to go up. So that was part of the trade-off. You're going to get to build at a much higher density than you were before. But as part of that, you have to there's got to be some give backs on your end as well. And one of those is the workforce housing. So I think, and also look at the historic preservation. I'm more in favor of that now that we've, not to go off on a tangent, but now that we've gone through a few of these historic preservation applications, I'm much more comfortable with dropping down the minimum square footage requirements for a lot to comply, because then you're giving somebody a 25% bonus on housing. Same with like the senior housing development we approved on Richards Ave. You gave a bonus for doing that housing there. So if you add enough carrots, then the fees, I think, are more than washed in those construction costs.
Yeah, everything, everything having to do with a project, every expense gets passed on. I don't see this as really making a big difference. The cost of permits gets passed on. The cost of coming to 2 or 3 different zoning commission meetings gets passed on.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because we, think about when we redid the Sono TOD regs, we removed almost every special permit hurdle that was on the regulations. And I think we've done a good job of, the only thing we're working on now, which takes a couple meetings, is just the design. So we're not having special permit public hearing process as much as we did. So I think those are expenses which we've taken out of the equation.
Anything else for Steve? We'll have another opportunity after the public speaks, but anyone else wish to speak before we go to the public? Okay, if not, Brian, you want to explain how people can request to speak?
Sure. So if you are on the Zoom call, at the bottom of your screen, if you hover over with your mouse, there's a raise your hand feature. You can click on that. And if you're dialed in on a phone, you could hit *9 and that will raise your hand as well. And with that, Mr. Blank has his hand up. I'll bring him over.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Adam Blank. I'm an attorney in Norwalk, speaking tonight, both on my own behalf, but also for Jerry Efren of Gray Rock Homes. Jerry's a Norwalk developer. He's built over 750 homes, and he most recently obtained that, which you just spoke of, the approval on Richards Avenue for elderly housing, and just yesterday filed a application to develop 40 more luxury elderly housing homes here in Norwalk on Fulham. And so I'd like to just go through a few different things, big picture and a little on the reg. First of all, the 1% fee, and this for my own behalf, on the smaller developments under 10 units, I think I agree that that's not going to be a significant impact. But what it really is that it's a 1% added cost to development of smaller residential developments, which either means that gets entirely passed off to the customer, or that the rate of return, the profit to the developer on the construction is going to be 1% less than they otherwise would have made. And I would argue that it's going to be 1% less than they otherwise would have made, because if they could charge more for those rents, they would. and get a higher rate of return with or without your 1% fee. And I would encourage you to at least start with that kind of a fee before you consider increasing it to 2 or 3%, because I think at that point you will lose development. On these smaller developments, their return might only be 8% or 7%. They're not. Sometimes they kill it, but certainly not always. And when you add those percentage fees on it, it can become an issue. But 1% is probably fine. And I agree on the large ones. What you're proposing is really not going to make a difference. Really, what I'm here for tonight is to deal with the middle ground ones, and specifically elderly housing, congregate care, assisted living developments. So first, I'll say the goal of increasing workforce housing and affordable housing is a good one. No objection at all to that. I think biggest picture, what's been sort of noted is this reg change. It's a tax on development, and it's a tax only on residential development. I think that rather than sort of creating new and additional taxes on development, that if the goal is to create more affordable housing, and I don't necessarily mean 8-30G qualifying workforce housing, I mean, broadly speaking, housing that people can afford, because we're in no jeopardy of losing our status with the 13 or 14% that we've already got of workforce, plus everything that's in the pipe. And if POCO ever happens, our grandkids will still won't have to worry about 8-30G. But if you're going to try to create more workforce housing, then I think it can be done in other ways. For example, one thing that there's been talk about for many years, but nothing's happened with it, is accessory apartments. The little apartment above the detached garage, or the little cottage in the backyard. Those are essentially not allowed in Norwalk. Those are cheap, inexpensive housing options. They also add value for the property owner, not take away. So it's sort of a win-win. You also, as Mr. Kleppen mentioned, there are some bonuses in the existing regulations to incentivize people to more than 10% of workforce housing, have never been used. And the reason they've never been used is because the bonus is worth 50 cents, but the cost to get it is $1, right? The hurdle's too high to hit those bonuses. But you certainly could have density bonuses. You could have parking reduction bonuses, height bonuses. You could create a system of bonuses, and I don't mean in the residential zones, in your business zones, that incentivize if you putting in 15% workforce or 20%, not as a mandatory requirement, but as a bonus, you would get something extra. In the residential zones, the regs, actually the POCD talks about cottage communities where you have little 1,000 to 1,200 square foot homes, single family homes, clustered together on sort of micro lots, smaller lots than what we typically allow. And those can be very sort of affordable housing options and profitable for somebody to build and satisfying a need in the community without a cost that this reg imposes. And when I say that, again, it doesn't impose a huge cost, and I'm going to get to where it's huge. It doesn't impose a huge cost on some of the larger developments, nor on the ones that are 9 units or less. But this reg is proposed to expand the areas to all of your residential zones, and based on staff's interpretation of the reg, would also include elderly housing, and if it includes elderly, then it would need to include assisted living and independent and congregate housing in those zones as well. So one thing I'd say is I'd love it if you put a pause on the reg and looked at, can we sort of create some win-win situations to incentivize workforce housing rather than tax? I'd actually think that you may want to look at the policy more broadly. I know that director mentioned that this is sort of an extension of an existing policy. And so you didn't want to wait on the zoning rewrite. I would point out in the POCD, which was just adopted, as you guys know, it actually talks about this, and I'm quoting from it. It says that you should create a housing policy advisory committee to develop and advise on housing policies that support Norwalk's quality of life, economic development, and affordable housing goals. The purpose is to create an integrated understanding of Norwalk's housing needs for both market rate and affordable housing. It goes on to identify how that committee should be staffed, that it should provide an annual report on housing market, housing needs, priorities, and policies to promote mixed income, diverse housing environments. It then goes on to say, as part of the housing policy plan, the city should develop an integrated citywide strategy for affordable housing in Norwalk, and the Housing Policy Advisory Committee should identify the most appropriate entity to lead the strategy in collaboration with other city and other agencies and groups. And I think that step is skipped in this process. And sometimes there's a huge need to kind of hurry through, but I think especially if you're doing a zoning rewrite anyway, that you can hit some of those steps, that you can meet with some of the stakeholders and try to see if there's ways to incentivize workforce housing that's less of a tax and more of a win for all, because I think that will also get you more workforce units than this change will. Now, but if let's just say that you say, oh, we're not interested in having redeveloping a policy or having a committee or taking more time on that, then I think if you're going to pass this reg, I would propose that or suggest that you consider passing it and continuing to carve out either the residential zones in their entirety, or at a minimum carving out from it elderly housing, congregate care, your assisted living, skilled nursing housing types. As it was sort of pointed out in your discussions, if you're putting up in these business zones, you can put up a 200-unit building or a 1,000-unit mid-rise apartment building, and there's some significant economies of scale in doing that, where putting in 10% workforce is something that it's certainly a cost, but it can be absorbed. Not only can it be absorbed, but the rents that you heard, $1,000, $1,200 a month as a workforce rental rate, compared to a market rate in those buildings of $1,500 to $2,500 a month. So you're talking about essentially a cost to the developer of $500 up to $1,000 a unit in providing workforce housing. Now that's when you apply a cap rate and you sort of figure out what the value of your development is with and without that workforce, that ends up becoming meaningful, but it's, manageable, and it's proven manageable. There's been plenty of development in Norwalk with this 10% requirement. But let's just kind of give a sense of comparison to that, to the Richards Avenue elderly housing that was just approved, and the 40 Fullen application that we've filed and is now pending in front of you. The 40 Fullen, those will be single family and duplex homes, that would have a value of $1 million or so each, something in that vicinity. You'd be looking at rental rates of around $5,500 a month. That's the rental rate on those units. Under this reg, those units would have to have, now the 40 Fullen, I believe, would be grandfathered in, but we're using that as our hypothetical example under this reg. Under this reg, those same units would have to be rented for approximately $1,400 a month. It's a cost of $4,000 per unit a month on a 40-unit development. That's four units of workforce. Well, it depends on how you look at it. It could be 2, could be 4, because those are 3-bedroom units. But the cost will be somewhere in the vicinity of $1 million loss to put in those workforce units on site for that type of elderly housing. And I think in a lot of the elderly housing, assisted living, congregate care facilities, one, you're dealing with a much more expensive product, and the cost for the workforce units skyrockets. But the way that your reg and the state statute and regs work, you can't just charge more because it's more expensive. It's everyone pays the same rate on a workforce unit based on bedroom size or family count. So this would be a really expensive regulation on elderly housing and assisted living. Those rents typically include at least some component of sort of services. And under the state statute and your reg, if those services are worked into the rental rate, they can't be carved out on workforce units. So they become even more sort of expensive to provide. And again, on a bigger development where your delta between a market rate unit is at $2,200 a month and a workforce unit at $1,100 or $1,200 a month, it's $1,000 a month loss. That's a cost to a developer of, let's say, $100,000, maybe $150,000 a unit, which is of course why the fee in lieu that's currently offered has never been used, right? And the reason it's never been used is that cost is $250,000 to $300,000 per unit for your fee in lieu. So a reasonable developer is going to say, oh, I'm not going to pay that when it's only going to cost me $100,000 or $150,000 to build the unit myself, right? So that's what they do. For elderly housing, and using the Fullen and Richards as an example, the cost per unit is so expensive that you would essentially have to pay the fee in lieu. So for those folks, you'd be paying $300,000 a unit for workforce housing to buy out, because it would be even more expensive to put it on site. On a smaller scale development, whereas on these massive developments, they're paying, which I think is fair, but they're paying $100,000 or $150,000 a unit for workforce units. So I think the cost is just way too great on these elderly housing, and it applies to congregate and assisted living, to all of those types of housing types. The cost is really expensive if you're going to require them to provide workforce units. So I would suggest that and they don't have the pay 1% of the fee option because they're going to be over 9 units. So I would suggest that if you want to do a 1% fee, if you feel like you don't want to carve them out entirely and you want to include them, making them pay the 1% fee instead of the workforce housing, I think that's fine. I think if you say, hey, well, we don't want to carve them out entirely and we don't want to do the 1% fee, then I think in connection with changes that you might be considering, I would suggest that you also reduce the fee in lieu and bring it down closer to $100,000 per unit, which then sort of puts them at least on a sort of even playing field with the folks building bigger developments at a lower price per unit. But I do think that you will see a significant negative impact from this reg on the development of properties that are in that 10 to 30 unit range, the smaller ones, 10 to 30 or so on residential, and anything that's 10 and up, that's assisted living, skilled nursing, congregate, elderly housing. Those are going to get really whacked by this reg. Let me just move on. If you're going to stick with the reg, I would propose a few, or I have a few concerns with the actual language that you've got. One, the reg uses the term residential construction value, which is sort of an odd term, and I would suggest that you consider using a different term that has more of a defined meaning or a common meaning. Value is cost is usually a term that you might hear, but not value, and there can be a significant dispute over what that actually means. In the reg, there's a section that says, and I'm quoting, does units, and then there's a comma, shall either include one workforce housing unit affordable to households earning no more than 80% of the state median income unit. And I don't know what that second unit, the second time that it says unit there, what that refers to. Maybe that's just a typo. If it means something, hopefully you can clarify that. And then the biggest concern about the sort of nitty gritty language, and this is my last point, I promise, and I'll shut up, is in subsection 4, where you're talking about, how you deal with existing developments that want to add on. It's not clear to me from the language in here, which means I think that you may have some fights and issues down the road about. So let's take as an example, I have an existing 7-unit development, and I'd like to add 3 units to it, which will bring me to 10 units. What are my workforce housing requirements under that scenario? Are we pretending that I'm only a 3-unit development, or am I a 10-unit development? I understand that it's only the new development that triggers things, but how are you going to treat that? If you have a 5-unit development and you add 2 units, is that a 2-unit development with no workforce requirement, or a 7-unit development with a workforce housing requirement? Norwalk for quite a while allowed you to build workforce housing off-site. And so there are projects that have off-site, that have satisfied their workforce housing requirements off-site. The way I read subsection 4, those folks wouldn't get the sort of benefit or the credit of their off-site workforce housing units. And it also would seem to me as a loophole on the other side that if I have, and I think maybe it was Commissioner Cantor, one of you folks raised something sort of on point on this, is if I've got an existing project, can I just build that out in 2-unit increments, and therefore avoid ever being at the 3 units? Because as long as it'll be existing without, I'll put 2 units on it, it still won't qualify. I put 2 more on it, I think it still doesn't qualify, or maybe it does, I don't know, but it's just not entirely clear to me. So I think that should be hashed out a little bit in the reg. And that's really all that I wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Diane CC.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. First, I want to say, I'm going to speak on behalf of East Norwalk Neighborhood Association as well. But speaking for me first, I want to say, hopefully while he's still on, just to get on the record, this may be the first time in 10 years, maybe more. I actually agree with every single thing that Attorney Blank just said. So I listened carefully. Thank you, Attorney Blank, for that thoughtful review. And I'm glad you hit on some of the concerns that I have as a mere mortal versus an attorney. And I hope those things get clarified. But I agree with everything that you were saying. And I do have a major concern with the impact of how this regulation would be reviewed for congregate and senior and assisted housing. And also, I'm really glad you brought up the issue of accessory dwelling units and middle housing, as they call it, and triplexes, et cetera, and what the impact would be there. Because I think we certainly want to encourage that type of development, the incremental development. And then also, thank you, Steve Kleppen, for the thorough review of the regulation. I wasn't sure if this was just going to be a high level read of this thing, but it was pretty detailed, so I appreciate that too. But given that, I do have some comments and I have a bunch of questions. I'm really sorry that I didn't have time today to get them in writing, so maybe you want to jot them down if you think that they're worthy of addressing and answering for the benefit of the commissioners. Maybe you can answer them before they deliberate. So my first question is, first I want to say that I applaud this regulation in concept, because of the fact that one of your goals was to bring the consistency of the regulation throughout all of our zones. And it's something that people have talked about for a long time, and I think this does it in terms of leveling the field here in terms of residential. I think I just want to make sure that the way that it is written, means that every zone that allows residential then will be subject to this new regulation. I'm glad you included the piece in the slide, Steve, as to the questions we've been asking about why now, as you embark on the regulations review. And I think kind of maybe the response was more of a why not response versus, what's driving it now versus waiting. I realize you're saying that to some extent this regulation already exists and you're just tweaking it, and that you can continue to tweak it as something may come up during the review. But I wonder, what might be driving this now to push this forward. Another question that we have is, well, you probably know that ENNA as a group, our board and our residents are very concerned about the controversial state proposed bills that are at the state legislature now that start to define some of the zoning control that may actually be enforced by the state and imposed on the local municipalities. And I wanted to know, Steve, if this may be in response to that, it'd be either ahead of time comply with it or to guard against having to comply with something. Or if it's unrelated to that altogether, or if this were to be implemented, what's your take on the proposed legislation, even though it's not all ironed out yet? What impact might that have on us? In terms of these dollar amounts with the fees, I wondered, I think Planning Commission had asked at their review, what is the fund now? Where does that sit in the city's accounting line, and how much is in the fund now? And then that raised a concern because the allocation of this pool of money, we're not really clear on how that process works. And I know you said you're going to kind of hash it out with the legal department, but will it work where where someone can apply for it at any time they're applying for a permit? Or are there windows of time during the year when a committee might be reviewing them, like something similar to community block development grants? What is the vetting process? How subjective is it? We would have concerns on that. And the terminology you used in the overview was it could be used for soft costs or acquisition. And this says acquisition by affordable housing developers. So I wondered if there's a legal definition somewhere of what an affordable housing developer might be. But also I want to make sure that we're not blocking out, kind of the mom and pop property owners. They may want to, and probably need way more than large developers. They would need access more to soft cost and acquisition funds than a large developer would. So I don't know if this is a good example, Steve, to say you have someone who's a current property owner who may want to look for some support and funding to expand on a property that they can expand, say, to a triplex, and would want to provide workforce or affordable housing as a component of that. Would a single little, property owner have access to those funds? And again, who would be an affordable housing developer? Who would be the committee that would vet these applications for their, worthiness and the amount that would get applied to it? I think I'm just hearing tonight for the first time, so I'll add this on, and I think my board would agree with me that at one point in there, you said that the allocation would be some or all of the funds. And I wasn't sure if you meant some or all of the funds that the person is requesting, or some or all of the funds in the fund. So for example, if there was, $900,000 in the fund, could a single developer with a particularly large project or projects deplete the fund? Or would it be limited to, how I guess how would the formula work? I'm not clear on the criteria for how these things get vetted, and then the criteria for how you determine a money amount and who would get it. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here a little bit. And I wanted to understand too, especially I know as Attorney Blank brought it up, I'm just thinking of something where you said there was 13.1% already that we comply with the workforce housing. Does a facility, something like a nonprofit like the Marvin, the under one roof facility, are those units all counted in that mix now? And how would a future development if someone wanted to come in and do something like the Marvin with congregate senior housing that does have some amenities and some services? One second. Yeah, I think that was basically it. And again, I'd be really curious to understand where this fund is, where it sits in the city, and how much is in there now, and really to talk about the money and the or to understand what that money is. And I'm more interested too in the what the process for vetting these applications would be coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to speak, you can use the raise your hand tool at the bottom of your screen, or if you're dialed in on a phone, you can hit *9. Going once, going twice. I think that's it, Lou.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Steve, response?
Yeah, and I'll respond to just based on the notes that I took. And if there are other items that I missed that you have questions about, please feel free to ask. So Attorney Blank had raised some really good points. A couple of things that I don't know if I would necessarily agree with. So I don't see this 1% taking 1% of the profits out of the equation, because the 1% fee is just based on the construction value. It's not based on land acquisition costs, site development costs. For example, also think about a mixed use project where someone has ground floor commercial or several floors of commercial. The fee would be just on the residential portion, not on the commercial portion. It doesn't include, land, like I said, land acquisition costs, architectural fees, or attorney's fees for that matter. Those kind of things are not factored into the equation. Those are also significant costs that they bear just to develop the property. We can add, we can look at the bonus provisions. Part of me thinks maybe removing the bonus provision altogether might be the way to go. I mean, if you add a bonus provision, you're going to end up with more units on the other side, more market rate units. And then there's going to be the complaint that we're adding too many market rate units. So I don't know if that's necessarily the best approach to go, but it's something that, we could look at going forward. A couple interesting points he raised in there, and I don't want to go after or talk about any other specific development too much, but $5,000 a month for a unit, I'm not sure. That seems pretty expensive to me, just off the top of my head. One thing that, if that particular project, they're talking about having all these amenities and services potentially available on site. If those are, he's correct, if those are, like, if you were going to be a tenant there, if you're required to pay for any of those services, that would affect the, those also have to be available to the affordable units as well. But if those are an a la carte menu or a kind of concierge program where I can pick and choose, do I want maid service? Do I want somebody to come in and help me with cooking, or, make sure I take my pills, or those kind of things? If those are optional things I can choose, that wouldn't affect the affordability, because those are not required as part of the rent. I'm sure that it's more profitable to include those in the package, but it depends on how that payment is structured. I don't agree, and I think you could simply clarify this right away. I don't think the congregate housing or any kind of nursing home or assisted living units would be affected by this, because if you look at the definitions in the regulations for single family, they refer to dwelling units. Multifamily refers to dwelling units. The senior housing one also refers to dwelling units. So, and if you want clarification on that, and you want to state that clearly on the record or add language to exclude those, I have no objection. I was not thinking about those kind of projects as part of this. It's more really dealing with housing units that are market rate units for, more independent living, not for, folks that are fully functional in society and don't need any kind of assistance. That's what, in my mind, it was targeting. Thank you for the catch for the second unit. That is a typo. It's not meant to mean anything. Just need to delete that out of there. To a couple points raised by Ms. Cece, it's not meant to adhere to any of the proposed legislation that's circulating around in terms of, whether it's to segregate Connecticut's promoting or anything else. I'm happy to pull up a memo where I had these same provisions recommended in 2019. We talked about that when we were looking at the South Norwalk rezoning at the time. And it was just decided based on all the other things going on, it was better to table those changes. The discussion of equity and all the other conversations that are occurring statewide brought this back up into my mind again. So maybe we should take a look at these kind of things. There is legislation regarding the accessory dwelling units that is pending, that is maybe on a separate track from some of the other broader bills that are being proposed. Norwalk is fairly liberal with its ADUs. We do not allow them currently in detached structures, but that's something we could look at. That's been brought up in the past, but there's been opposition to it. I don't have a big issue with that one way or the other. And if that was something the commission wanted to look at, I'd say let's wait to see what that legislation, how it shakes out before we do anything, but I don't have any strong position on that one way or another. Could someone deplete the fund? Technically, yes. Say there was $1 million in the fund. Someone could come in and say, I've got a project where I'd like to use all $1 million of that. And that's got to be evaluated and determine whether the project is appropriate. Those funds, though, do have to go towards housing less than the affordability standards now. It's where the median income is less than 60. So it's meant to hit those lower thresholds, not the specific work hold thresholds. Excuse me. I don't think there is a definition of affordable housing developers. There are developers that do specialize in affordable housing. So it wouldn't be there's not meant to be an exclusion. The housing authority would be one entity, but there are other property managers in town that have units that would fall into this category. So technically they would be eligible too. As I mentioned in the presentation, there are 3 projects that have opted for the fee since it's been enacted. Only one of them has paid the fee yet, just because that's the only project that is up and running, and that's the Harborside Sono. And I think their fee was, as I mentioned, was about $60,000, and it was on a smaller number of units, just because they initially got approved before the regulation was passed, and then they came back once we changed the regulations and added some more density, and so they chose to kind of break up how they applied their affordability. I addressed all the notes that I had, but it's very possible that I missed some of the points that were brought up. And if you have questions or things you want me to touch on, I'm happy to do so.
Questions from the commission members?
So Steve, can you just clarify again? So you're saying by definition, nursing homes, for example, or elderly housing of that nature are excluded from this, so that we don't really have to worry about that point?
That was my intent. If you're concerned that the language is not strong enough, we can add something. Let me pull up my screen quick.
I would ask if others are concerned. I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned on the I guess like the 40s Richard, where it's like, what exactly is that?
Yeah, so that's got a specific definition. So
okay,
just what I have up here is it's kind of, here's dwelling, multifamily dwelling, and it specifically, uses the word dwelling and dwelling unit within those definitions. Can you guys see that, or is it too tight?
No,
I can see it.
Okay. Luckily, congregate is right before D, so I don't have to make everybody dizzy. Okay. So congregate, by definition, is assisted living facility. So I a clear legal distinction between the two there. Excuse me, don't look at the screen for a second as I scroll. But I'm going to go down to nursing home, which is also defined. And I think what Attorney Blank was referencing was defined too. Nursing home. So yeah, nursing home, hospice, establishment for the care of the age. And it doesn't specifically use the term dwelling unit within it. So I think to me, that's a clear distinction. But again, like if you have concerns about that, and I was not trying to, look at those kind of facilities because obviously those serve a much different and important need within the community. So I wasn't, in my mind wasn't targeting those as part of this. And I thought the term we defined was senior housing development, but it must not be because I don't see it.
Might be under elderly, Steve.
Elderly, yeah, thank you, yeah. Now I gotta go
I
back.
think it's fine, but I'd ask others if they can serve that concern or not.
Yeah, so I think that, the Richards Avenue one and has the term dwelling unit. So I think to me, that's where the distinction is. If everybody thinks that's clear, that's fine. If not, I'm happy to go back and try to tighten that up a little bit.
So you think it would apply as currently written to the Richards Island Avenue project and the one they're proposing on Fellow Street?
Correct.
And do we think it should apply? I guess that's the question.
They seem to serve different purposes. Where
Yeah,
one
I think
elderly
that-
seems more, in my view, more of the standalone facilities, like people on their own just have some sort of concierge or some sort of collection of services. So I don't know, they seem very different to me, and I would think it should apply in those cases, but curious what others think.
Well, frankly, I think these issues go away if we apply a fee to basically to all construction in the city. Again, whether we're in a position to act tonight on enacting a fee for all construction, given that it wasn't included here, or whether we simply just continue to discuss just the language changes that have been suggested, is up to you, or whether we move this forward with a vote later this evening, is up to the commission. We don't have to make a decision now. We can wait until we've completed our 3 public hearings. But are there other questions for Steve that you wish to have answered?
Yeah, one observation I have is that with the development on Richards Avenue and the one that they're doing on Pillow, if they had a lower base rent, like let's say hypothetically $3,000, and then charges for services. So you rent the place for $3,000, and then you pay for someone to come in and help you with this or that, and you pay for, there are various services that you would get, and if those are separate fees, I don't see how this would be a problem for them.
Well, shouldn't we get an answer to that question before we make the decision? If there's a base rental and these new regs only have to do with the base rental, that's very different than if it has to do with fully loaded services.
Are they required to take fully loaded services? I thought
Exactly.
when we did the public hearing that the answer was no, that some people would need no services initially, And then they may need someone to just come clean. And then they need someone to cook meals for them. And then they may ultimately need someone to live in because they need help in the middle of the night. So my understanding was that they would have available all these different levels of service as time went on. That's what I understood.
Steve, is that your understanding as well?
I can't say I'm positive one way or other whether those services are required or optional with that. I mean, I don't know, I don't see why you couldn't structure it so they were optional. I would probably understand why you would want them to be mandatory, because I'm sure that, definitely would be more profitable to add that on, but I'm just speculating on that part.
Okay.
If we apply the fee to, like Lou was saying, to all construction, would we need to go back and revise the text and say like residential, mixed use, and commercial?
Right, yeah, we'd have to, that would be changing it significantly enough where we'd have to renotice it. I think we'd have a completely different meeting too. I think
Yeah.
pretty much from the tenants would be higher. I would think.
Well, the fact is, we can deal with it here, now and in the coming weeks, or we can address it as part of the rewrite of the zoning regulations. I just like to make sure that we have a full and complete discussion of it.
Or we could do both. We could approve it now. This is fairly straightforward. It's expanding it. It's trying to make it consistent across all zones, and then as the housing study proceeds that Steve is talking about, then we can modify things to include all construction, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Any further questions for Steve before we close out the hearing?
Yeah, Lou, I just wanted to pull up the planning commission recommendation and then the state DEP's recommendation to get read into the record before you close it.
Well, oh, you're right. Before we vote, we need to do that. I was going to wait until we're ready to vote, but that's fine.
Yeah, I just want to get them on the record.
Okay. We'll ask the secretary to read them into the record.
All right, let me pull those up real quick. And then I'll mention that the Harbor Commission did review it and give it a positive recommendation. So if you can see that, this is the letter from the state DEP.
Okay.
Who is the secretary?
It's either you or Michael.
I don't know which one.
I think it's you, Galen.
Okay. Well, this is always a challenge.
Read it if you like.
Pardon me?
I don't mind reading it if you'd like, if it's easier.
Oh, okay.
I'll save you that. It's fine.
Then I'm, like squinting at it.
That's fine. Dear commission members, thank you for forwarding the above referenced zone change referral to the Land and Water Resource Division of Connecticut Deep, which we received electronically on March 27th, 2021. Our office has reviewed the regulation change for consistency with the goals and policies of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act and finds the proposal generally consistent. These comments are made in accordance with CGS Section 22A 104E, which requires notification to this office at least 35 days prior to the commencement of the hearing thereon. Please contact me with any questions on this or any coastal management matter you may have. Sincerely, Marcy Valiant.
All right, and then I'll pull up the planning commission recommendation.
Can you blow it up one, Brian? My eyes aren't as young as they used to be. Okay.
You're younger than mine.
Okay, at their August at their April 14th, 2021 meeting, the Planning Commission made the following decisions. Be it resolved that number 2021-12R zoning commission amendments to the workforce housing regulations dated 3-25-21 be approved. Be it further resolved that the reasons for this action are to implement the following plan of conservation and development goals, policies, and actions. 1, expand workforce housing options, including conducting a citywide housing study and reviewing existing workforce housing regulations to allow more employees to live in Norwalk and avoid costly commutes in distant locations. That's in chapter 3. Second one, development of policies that promote mixed use, diverse housing environments, reduce concentration of poverty, and support economic development. And that's in chapter 4. Number 3, continue to meet or exceed the state 10% goal for affordable housing, which is in chapter 4. And the fourth one, continue the inclusionary zoning program, also in chapter 4. Be it further resolved that the proposed amendment is consistent with chapter 4, housing and choice and healthy lifestyle, which on page 68 states, while from the state's point of view, Norwalk has fulfilled its regulatory responsibility to provide affordable housing. There is a continuing need for affordable housing to serve the city's very low and low income population, including seniors and disabled persons. Be it further resolved that the Planning Commission requests that the Zoning Commission increase the proposed fee based on research provided by staff in order to make a more meaningful impact for the Affordable Housing Fund. Be it further resolved that the notice of this action be forwarded to the Norwalk Zoning Commission.
And Brian, the approval of the Harbor Commission?
Yeah, we just have to mention that they did give it a positive recommendation. We don't have to read that one onto the record.
Okay. All right. Any final comments before we close the hearing for this evening? All right, then we'll close the hearing and move on to the next. I see that Attorney Sachi is in attendance. So let's go back to 2021-10 SP, Norwalk Housing Ventures 2 LLC, 1 Elmcrest Terrace, proposed historic preservation development to rehabilitate existing historic buildings and construct a 6-unit residential addition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you, members of the commission, for accommodating my schedule. I guess I joined within about 10 minutes after you commenced your meeting, but I do appreciate the fact that you were willing to adjust your schedule to accommodate me. So many thanks to all of you. For the record, my name is Liz Sachi. I'm an attorney with Carmody, Torrance, Sandeck, and Hennessy, and I represent the property owner who is presenting before you this evening special permit application. That is Norwalk Housing Ventures 2 LLC. On the call this evening, in addition to myself, is Kevin Moses of Norwalk Housing Ventures, Mark Hopper, project architect of Krosky Architects, and Chris DeAngelis of Cabezas DeAngelis as our civil engineer. In addition, Tess Schwartz of Tessera is a traffic engineer, and she is on the call today as well. Some housekeeping matters. All abutting property owners were notified of the submission of this application on March 23rd by certificate of mailing, and that certificate should be in the file. And furthermore, all abutting property owners and those directly across the street were notified of tonight's public hearing by certified mail return receipt requested, and I believe an envelope addressed to Mr. Baker was delivered today, containing those green cards that had been received as of today's date, as well as copies of letters for which the green cards have not been received, and the USPS tracking information for those letters. I'm sure if that Mr. Baker can confirm that. Just for the record, no neighbors have contacted me in connection with either the submission of the application nor the notices sent to them by certified mail return receipt requested. There are 3 letters, however, in the file that were attached to the application from neighbors in support of the application. I would ask that those be read into the record and made part of the permanent file at the appropriate time. So the applicant before you is Norwalk Housing Ventures. It is an affiliate of Workforce Partners, which is the owner of numerous workforce housing units in Norwalk on South Main Street, on Flax Hill Road, one of which back in the fall you approved a similar type development for 204 Flax Hill Road. This property is 1 Elm Crest Terrace. It sits up by the hospital, District 1, Lot 3, Block 10. It's in a D-resident zone. It sits on about just over an acre of land. And if possible, could Mark Hopper, could you possibly, or Christy Angelis, screen share the survey? Right now, as you know, if you've been by the site, there are 3 structures on the property. One is the stately Victorian, a Queen Anne style structure that was constructed in the late 1800s, about 4,200 square feet, and it currently has 12 dwelling units. Unfortunately, the front facade is marred by the crisscrossing fire escape. That part of this application would be to remove that fire escape and return that structure to its prior glory. There's also a 19th century building we call the Cottage. That's about 6,700 square feet that consists of 2 one-bedroom units right now. That is the structure to which the addition is proposed. And lastly, there's the Barracks, which is built in 1958 and houses 16 one-bedroom apartments. And that structure is about 11,000, 12,000 so square feet in total. The proposal is to, first of all, renovate the Victorian by removing the fire escapes. One unit would be removed from that structure. So it would have 11 units, 5 studios and 6 one-bedrooms, and it would be fully sprinklered. And then there are no changes proposed to the Barracks, but the most significant change is a new addition to be proposed to the Cottage, which is a very interesting structure that exists right next to the access way out onto Woodbury Avenue. So the result, if all approvals are granted, would be 35 units, 31 bedroom, and 5 studios. The applicant is proposing one affordable in accordance with your regulations that you're considering, since the existing units, we're proposing 5 new units and 6 new units, and we suspect that 1 unit would be more than sufficient given the rental character of this project as it exists today. So we've submitted a special permit application under section 118-360B2Y and are asking for various, as we call them, exceedances relating to density, backup parking dimension, recreation area, building coverage, and parking spaces, all in conjunction with the upgrades to the existing historic structure that already exists on the property. The requirements for the special permit exceedances request have all been identified in the application, and since it's already late, I'm not going to go through any great detail. It's all in the narrative and the moving papers. We can certainly go through those later if you'd like. But at this point, I'd like Christy Angelis, if you would, to start and walk you just briefly through the site plan. We'll be followed by Mark Hopper and then Tess Schwartz. While Chris is getting ready, I just wanted to let you know that we have received the sign-offs from Water Pollution Control Authority, First District Water Department, Health Department, Fire Department, Transportation, Mobility, and Parking. And the only remaining sign-off was Public Works. The last interaction I had with Wilbur Geron of DPW was this afternoon around 1 o'clock, but he was not able to get to issuing a sign-off today. But I see no reason why we won't be able to secure that. And you can certainly make that a sign off a condition of approval should you deem it appropriate to approve this application. So with that, Chris?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Brian, I'll need you to, I need you to allow me. It's going to say PC, DeAngelis PC. Then I can share the my screen with you.
I don't think I see on the list, Chris.
It's waiting for me to get in. It says it's a. No.
And you want the architecturals up? I can pull those up. Or site plan.
Yeah. Well, we were going to start with the survey.
Okay, I'll pull that up.
Okay.
Survey or engineer plans?
Survey.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So just again to go over the layout of the land, the large building you see at the bottom of the site, the 2 rectangular buildings next to each other, that's the Barracks building. That currently contains 16 units, and there are no proposed changes to that building. The building that you see in the upper right-hand corner, that's the one that's most visible from Elm Crest Terrace. That is the Victorian, the mansion. That currently contains 12 units. One of the units will be decommissioned, so there'll be a net of 11 total units in the proposed conditions. There's no significant changes to that other than to remove the exterior fire escapes. And Mr. Mark Hopper will go through the changes proposed for that building. And then the building that is the subject of the application is that building in the center of the lot there. You can see that currently it's just a small, very small 2-story building, 1 unit per floor, what that we call the cottage. And behind that is that L-shaped addition to the cottage, which will contain 6 more units. One of which on the first floor will be a handicapped accessible unit. And that's why you see the handicap space in front of that ground floor unit there. So I looked at the project for parking and storm drainage. For parking, the existing number of parking spaces is 42. The proposed, we will have 41 spaces. So it's only a net loss of 1 parking space. And the way we are able to achieve that, if you can zoom in, Brian, on the plan there, you can see that 6 of those parking spaces actually fall underneath the building. Yep, right there. So you can see those 6 parking spaces fall underneath the building. And then there were 4 additional spaces that we kind of turned perpendicular that run along the side of the building. So we only lost 1 parking space with the addition of the building. The building goes in an area that's already all impervious. There was a small tree island that gets lost, but we're adding in a slightly larger tree island. So in the final analysis, we only have we actually have a less impervious area. Comes out to 1,340 square feet of more grass area, more infiltration area. So I don't know if you can go to the next sheet, would be my drainage plan. That looks like, I don't know if you have that one there, Brian. I was just going to point up the drainage infiltration system real quick. Oh, okay. I was just able to get on now. Finally kicked in. You should be able to see my PC now, Brian, and I can share my screen if you give me a sharing capability.
Yeah, if you're on as a panelist, you should be able to share.
Okay, there we are. All right, it worked. How about that? All right, so again, this is the survey. We went through the 3 buildings, and you can see this plan here is good because it shows the size of the small size of the cottage building in the center of the site. There's 1 parking space. I'll just zoom in real quick. That's located right next to the building. That's this space right here. That's the only parking space that we lose. These other spaces up here are the ones that fall underneath the building. And then these 4 on the end are the ones that we kind of turn and rotate perpendicular to the building. So really no loss of parking at all. All right, this is the site plan, which we just went over with Brian. You can see the handicap space here next to the ground floor handicap unit. I'll just flip back to here for a minute. You can see how small the existing tree island is here next to that parking space. And you can see in the proposed condition that the tree island gets much bigger. It kind of wraps around the front and the side of the new building. As far as drainage goes, it's very simple. Because we're reducing impervious area, there's not a lot of need for holding back water. We are able to just get the volumes that we need by just putting a very small infiltration system next to the building in the parking lot. It overflows into an existing catch basin on the site, which handles most of the water from the parking lot. We did get a letter from Wilbur Guerin. He had some questions about the drainage report. We responded to those. We haven't heard back from them, but we don't expect that there will be much further discussion other than what we've already had. Without going into a lot more detail, I think that's probably most of the stuff you want to hear regards the improvements that are being made to the mansion, the Victorian mansion in the northeastern part of the site. I'll just end with the nice pretty picture that Kevin did for us. which shows what the site will look like. And again, you can see some expanded landscaping area around the building, Victorian mansion over on the right-hand side, and then the barracks building to remain as it is. Attorney Secchi already went through the approval letters that we have. We have already talked with Anthony Fraschini from the First Taxing District Water Company. We have a will serve letter from him. We received yesterday a letter from Chris Cavaliere, who is an engineer with the WPCA, and essentially that's a will serve letter. He had some final comments on his letter that were just kind of standard conditions of approval for WPCA. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark, and I can stop sharing my screen. Any questions before I stop sharing?
Just before Mark begins, and as he's preparing, I wanted to also advise you that the Norwalk Historical Commission reviewed the proposal at the end of March, I believe, and they have issued a letter of recommendation, which also should be in the file.
Great. Good evening, everyone, Mr. Chairman, Commission members, staff. So what we have in front of you is the floor plans of the second and third floor plans of the Victorian building. Existing is on your left and proposed is on the right. We really have no interior changes to the building other than the addition of sprinklers. But what we're illustrating here is what's highlighted in left, on the left side in the existing, are the locations of the existing emergency fire escapes on the front of the building. And those will be, as part of this project, those will be removed, and I think will greatly improve the aesthetics, and we'll be able to see the historic character of the existing building. So moving on, again, same thing, existing street elevation on the left and proposed street elevation on the right. Certainly highlighted the structure of the fire escapes. I think everybody's fairly familiar with them. Certainly the fire escapes, as they are built out of wood, there's a lot more solid to those fire escapes than what's really illustrated in these plans. We've got some photographs of the existing building that you can really see how much of a visual block of the existing building really occurs by these fire escapes. Here's a colored elevation. Again, primarily the coloration of the building is going to remain the same. Highlight color of the red doors. Body of the building will remain as gray, and treatment of the tower element, the turret, as well as the major trim pieces and columns around the wraparound porch will remain white. The exterior colors are illustrated to the existing exterior colors are illustrated to the left of the left of this colored rendering. On the right side of the plan, you'll see 4 existing photographs. Certainly upper right-hand corner, I think, is indicative of how much those existing fire escapes really do block the view of the existing building. And then we've got a couple of shots as we really kind of move around the outside of the exterior of the building. Again, we think this is a great enhancement of this property, and certainly if it weren't for the historic preservation incentives, I would guess that the owner of the property wouldn't even contemplate their removal. But that said, they are certainly going through a fairly sizable expense of fully sprinkling the building to allow the removal of those fire escapes. Moving on. Oh, I'm sorry. And here's an exterior rendering. that shows what the building will look like. And this also illustrates some of the landscape enhancements that are going to occur at the front of the building as well, and either side of the front stair, and as well around the corner, some additional plantings. So between the plantings and the removal of the fire escapes, I think that this project will kind of enhance the historic nature of the street and will provide a nice bookend to the project that we had worked with at 3 Elmcrest, its immediate neighbor to the right. Moving to the cottage, as was illustrated by Chris, the existing cottage building is a 2-story structure, square in floor plan, 1 unit per floor, so a single unit on the first floor, a single unit on the second floor. Our proposal is to add 6 units, and we approach this project obviously by looking how at the best possible way to maintain as much parking as we possibly could. As was illustrated really on the site plan, we've got a link that really kind of was located primarily in a traffic lane, and then the other bar building piece is located up above existing parking. And this is really kind of a carport type thing where it's opened on 3 sides, totally accessible from the drive up above, but then again, open on the sides. From there, we go up to the second floor and have 3 single 1-bedroom units. And then a third floor that's just above the parking is 2 additional units. As our design approach by looking at the building, which we'll illustrate in our rendering and some of the elevations, is that we really looked at stepping the mass of this addition up from the existing building. We certainly didn't want to crowd the existing building. So the design was really kind of able to mesh a goal of not losing parking spaces, but then being able to honor the existing structure and not overcrowd it. Coming to elevations, south elevation on the lower right is, I guess, what you could term the main entrance elevation. This is the existing cottage building. The main entrance to that cottage is located at the center of the gable. And you can start to see how the building, our addition, steps up from the existing. I think it's evident by looking at the elevations is that we chose to emulate a lot of the detailing of the existing building in a contemporary way, so that the buildings do in fact work together very nicely. East elevation is the elevation that you would likely see from 1 Elmcrest in the small view corridor that you'll get from between the Victorian and the barracks building. And here again, illustrating the stepping up of the building as the grade slightly rises. When we go from the 2-story structure, really 1.5 stories, I guess, second story tucked up underneath the roof, full 2-story, and then a 2-story of residential units above parking. North elevation shows the extent of the building with the parking below, and west elevation again shows the stepping up of the structure. Colored elevations again showing the existing structure. The coloration of the new is to blend and match with the existing cottage. So you'll see the coloration of the clapboards of the existing cottage is then emulated in the new addition. But then to show some difference between the new and the existing, we have white board and batten siding at the base and in some of the gable ends. From a material standpoint, again, we talked about the board and batten siding, cementitious, a hardy plank type product, cementitious shingle siding, which is the gray, which is on the upper portion of the building. Mission brown asphalt, architectural asphalt shingles, again, vinyl clad window with PVC trim, and then PVC trim pieces that help create some of the architecture and recall some of the vocabulary of the existing building. What you'll see is we've got some bracketing that occurs here that it's reminiscent of the bracketing of the front porch of the existing cottage. That bracketing occurs at the Juliet balconies of the proposed work. And that's what you see here. Again, this is kind of the view angle that you would see between the existing Victorian and the barracks building. Again, some of the detailing that we emulated the existing building above the Juliet balconies, as well as the similar detailing and pitches of the gable and roofs that pick up the detailing of the cottage. And finally, we are adding 4 exterior light fixtures onto the addition. They're wall packs. They're showed in these 4 locations. They have different lighting distributions within the shell of the light fixture. And these are the lighting patterns. And then you've got a photometrics diagram that shows that at the property line, we have 0 foot candles, so we don't have any light bleed across the property line. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back to Liz if she has any final comments before we open it up to comments from the community and from the commission.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Chris. Members of the commission, do you have any questions for Chris or for Mark at this point?
Liz, at the last time we got together on this project, I asked about the concrete and block wall in front of the project. You haven't shown any pictures of it, but it's in serious need of repair. And I haven't heard anything in this presentation about repairing it.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman. First of all, the concrete wall that surrounds the property in front of the barracks, we have.
Liz, I've got some images if you'd like me to bring them up.
Sure, that'd be fine. It is structurally sound, so if that's a concern in terms of safety, we have determined that it is structurally sound. Some of the seams have been repaired, and what we do intend to do is remove the cap that's on the top because it isn't consistent. One of the difficulties with doing much to the wall is that it sits right on the sidewalk. So we'd considered perhaps installing some landscaping to either shield it or soften it, but there isn't sufficient space to do that. As a matter of fact, there's no space to do any landscaping right adjacent to it on the sidewalk side. One of the things that we're contemplating, and if it's amenable to the commission, is to install landscaping that could cascade over the wall from the grade on the other side of it to sort of to hide it, to soften it, or to improve the aesthetics of it. Beyond that, there really isn't much else that we intend to do at this point. But if there are some reasonable suggestions that staff or commissioners have, we're certainly interested in hearing those. But we think that perhaps some interesting landscaping that could be installed to cascade over would probably be the best solution, the most visually pleasing solution. Kevney, do you have any other suggestions at this point?
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that, and those are good comments, Liz. And Commissioner Schulman, thank you again for bringing this up. One of the biggest things that I think could go to improve the look of this wall is removing the remaining caps that are on top of it. I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that there's not a consistency of treatment for the top of wall. And I think if we remove those caps, it'll bring some continuity to the look on the streetscape. And to Liz's point, as you can see, we've done a wealth of improvements for the street frontage of this property already. I mean, looking at it, what it was before to what it is today is a pretty miraculous transition. But planting some more plants, say creeping phlox, things of that nature that might be able to droop over the wall, add some seasonal color interest, and soften the appearance of that existing concrete wall. And I'd also like to point out that where the wall required repair, we've done so. And I actually submitted those photos to Mr. Baker and Mr. Kleppen already.
Is there a reason for consistency? Because it's, depending on where you look at it, it looks differently. Isn't it possible to put a thin coat over it of a stucco-like material that would further enhance it? I mean, I like the idea of having some of the plants helping to cover it. But the basic wall itself is
It's
not
very
very
ugly.
expensive.
It's very ugly. I drove by it and it's really an eyesore, in my opinion. The wall.
Would it be a possible compromise, for lack of a better word, that if you deem it appropriate to have some additional treatment, that be a condition that you make of approval, but we work out with staff something that would be what they deem acceptable and what we would determine to be acceptable? Because at this point, it's difficult to determine whether or not a stucco facing or something similar, first of all, costs and if it's if we're even able to do it. But if it's something that you consider that important, and Kevney, please correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps that could be a condition of approval that we work directly with staff with and not need to come back to you to review.
I speaking for myself, I think that would be acceptable.
And if I could just piggyback on that briefly, and I appreciate both of your comments, Commissioners Shulman and Wells. I think that stuccoing is the type of thing where cracks or the look of the wall itself might remanifest more quickly than, say, painting that wall. And I think it would achieve the same goal that you're looking for.
Again, I'm comfortable leaving it up to the staff to discuss this with you.
What our door looks like now.
I am too, but you know what? How would you paint it? What would you paint it? What color would you paint it?
Well, if stucco is a gray color, right, and it's just really reminiscent of concrete, but I think what would be most harmonious for the site might be to play off of the color of the barracks building. And I think that would create a much more consistent look.
So it would be gray, the barracks building themselves
Correct.
are really pretty ugly. You know, the house is beautiful, is wonderful, but so
Well,
making it the same gray as the barracks building.
I think that would be what would be most appropriate, just given its surroundings. And a lot of the times when things are consistent, it's more appealing to the human eye. So I think, again, marrying those two together would be an appropriate approach.
Again, I'm comfortable having the staff work with the developer on arriving at a solution, a happy solution that works for everybody.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to turn the mic, for lack of a better word, over to Tess Schwartz of Tessera, so she can review with you the analysis of traffic and the findings.
Hi, good evening. Due to the historic nature of this site, a traffic study was required, and I have completed capacity analysis, which we've submitted. Bottom line is that the existing operations at the nearby intersections, they're operating efficiently. They have excess capacity, and with the addition of the 5 apartments, During the morning peak hour, we could expect a total of 2 new trips to and from the site. During the afternoon, an additional 3 trips. And adding that traffic in, there's still plenty of capacity at the intersection. So I think there wouldn't be a significant impact there. I looked at the crash data repository information from the Connecticut crash data repository for the last 3 years. There weren't any abnormal accident frequencies or severity that I could identify. The site is operating one way with entrance on Elmcrest Terrace and exiting onto Woodbury. I think that will operate efficiently. And then because this site is near the hospital where there's some jockeying for on-street parking, we did conduct a parking analysis, and we counted the parked vehicles in the parking lot during early morning and late evening hours when residents would be home. There were 27 occupied spaces and 15 available spaces during both of those periods. That's a rate of 0.9 spaces per unit. So applying that to the 35 proposed units, 32 spaces would be required to accommodate the units, and 41 are being provided. We also had a question from staff about construction. The 15 available spaces should be sufficient for construction workers' vehicles. And then after construction, there's plenty of parking for the residents on site. So given everything, it's my opinion that this development won't have a significant impact to traffic within the area.
Does anyone have any questions of Tess, or again, of Chris or Kevney or Mark? Okay, we look forward to comments from the public, and we just want to reserve maybe a minute or two at the end for conclusion and conclusory statements and a summary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brian, if you would explain to the public how to raise their hands.
Sure. So if you're on the Zoom call and you'd like to speak on this application in favor or in opposition, you can use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're dialed in on a phone, you could hit *9 and that will raise your hand. Seeing none, Lou.
Okay. Fine, we'll go back to Attorney Succi for final comments.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman. And for the record, I'll just briefly note the letters received in support of this application. One letter is from Anthony Gaglio, the managing member of 3 Elmcrest Terrace LLC, which indicates that he's the managing member, and our neighbor has notified us of their plans to construct 6-unit addition at 1 Elmcrest. We support their effort to improve the property and housing options in Norwalk. The second letter is from Timothy Billings, and he is an abutting property owner with a mailing address of 20 Lake Drive in Oxford. He had indicated the same letter that he had been notified of the plans and that he supports the effort to improve the property and housing options in Norwalk. And the last letter that was part of the record, that should be part of the record, was issued by Jim Licari of Licari Properties. And he indicates he's the owner of 5 Woodbury Avenue. Our neighbor Housing Ventures 2 has notified us of their plans to construct an addition, and we support their effort to improve the property and the housing options in Norwalk. Those are the only letters that I received. Just wanted to make them part of the record. Since there were no individuals who opposed and no further indications of individuals who support the application, just want to close by suggesting that the standards of review set forth in section 118.1450 of the zoning regulations have either been met or exceeded. In addition, and they're all identified in the application and moving papers. Furthermore, the standards of review for the exceedances that we sought in connection with density, parking backup aisle dimension, recreation area, building coverage, and parking have all been met. And those include, the minimum lot size. The structure is located on the it's located on the Norwalk Historic Inventory. The reductions are clearly identified in terms of the exceedances that we have presented, that the special permit, if granted, shall remain in effect so long as the structure is preserved and maintained. The deviations from the standards are only those necessary to encourage preservation of the historic Victorian, and that the commission and the redevelopment agency shall determine that the structure contributes to the community character. And I think all of the documentation and analysis of the Victorian and the cottage by both Mr. Hopper and Todd Bryan, our historical consultant, reveal the value of preserving these structures. So for all of these reasons, and for the testimony presented this evening, we suggest that the application meets or exceeds the requirements and ask that you approve. If at all possible, if you could do so tonight, that would be terrific. That concludes our presentation, but if you have any questions of me, Chris, Mark, Kevney, or Tess, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any further questions from commission members? Seeing none, we'll close this hearing and move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the commission, for your time.
Thank you, commissioners. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Our final hearing this evening, 1-20R Zoning Commission, extension of a 12-month moratorium on certain uses in the I-1 zone, including building material and storage yards, contractor storage yards, and single and two-family dwellings. Again, I'll ask Mr. Kleppen to give the presentation.
Sure, and for all of your benefit, there is no real presentation. This will be very brief. As you know, we did enact the moratorium last year. The moratorium was in response to a couple different things. One, we were just about to start a study of the industrial zones, which is underway. And, there was the public forum, which I think a lot of you attended last Thursday evening. And at the same time, there were lingering ongoing concerns regarding specifically contractor yards in industrial zones and their, proliferation and how they're being managed and where they should be or shouldn't be. Staff also brought up the concern about proliferation of housing industrial zones, citing the need to make sure there's enough industrial zone property in the future, so the city has a mix of uses and has the ability for job growth and add space for the appropriate types of industry. So the moratorium was enacted. There was a clause in there where we kind of foresaw that maybe the industrial zone study wasn't going to be done by the time the moratorium had expired. So we did put a provision in there so that the commission has the ability to extend that for another year, which is what we're doing now. We did have conversations at a prior meeting about possibly including self-storage in there, as well as a distribution, not warehouse, but distribution itself. If that's something the commission still wanted to pursue, we could do that as on a separate track. We just couldn't add that in to this since the hearing was noticed with the specific language. There were several emails that were received, and I forwarded those on to the commission, several in support and several asking that the Norden, specifically for Norden and the RI zone, be included. There was another email that came in after the meeting started. I can forward, it's part of the record, but it was similar to the other emails about Norden. It came in late, so it just didn't get forwarded to you. Just to give an update, so the study, the first meeting, public meeting was the other night. I think, most of the feedback that I received was pretty positive about things. So there'll be a follow-up meeting with the consultant where they'll, compare notes, see where things stand, and then, come back with, further discussions with the oversight committee, and then there'll be final recommendations on where to go, probably more specific in terms of some of the zoning boundaries and some of the uses that we maybe didn't talk about, but I think that's kind of the next step. That's all I really have to say about that. If you have questions or concerns, please ask.
Norden is not, the RI zone is not currently in scope, correct?
Correct.
And that could be considered in the same way. The self-storage and
Yeah, I mean, I had concerns about making it so broad that, I don't think every special permit use would be problematic in that zone or even in this zone. So I don't know if I would want to pursue any, or at least I would recommend pursuing such a blanket oversight in case, maybe somebody will come up with a special permit use that's good in that area that's already allowed, and then we could consider that.
And I mean, I agree with Steve. I think we would all like to see that land developed. So I wouldn't want to foreclose the possibility of the property owners coming forward with a proposal that might be acceptable to the city and the residents of the area, and foreclose that possibility for a full year.
That makes sense.
I agree.
Any other comments from the commission members before we open it up to the public?
Does it need to be for a year, this extension?
So that's a good question. So if, say, the whatever the final recommendations of the approved plan are, we would then, more than likely to make it a clean track and a clear track, we would probably go through the process of amending the citywide plan again. And that's a whole nother public hearing process we have to go through. And then amend the zoning regulations to reflect the industrial zone study. So that could happen within a year. If there were specific changes you wanted to enact right away, we could do that. So at that point, then we just amend that section of the moratorium language to eliminate it altogether. So it doesn't have to be a year, but a year gives us, I think, enough time to make sure we get all those steps done.
Okay, anything else before we open it up? Okay, Brian, you want to do your thing?
Sure. I have a baby on my lap now, so sorry if you hear any background. If you would like to speak on this application, you could use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen, or you could dial *9 if you're on a phone.
Brian, we don't object to cooing.
Brian, I want to see the baby. I bet the baby's cute.
Oh, she's fine.
Ah, very cute.
But I'll bring Judy over.
I think she takes after her mother.
Well, yeah, you said.
Ooh, ouch.
I agree.
Hi, are you waiting for me?
Yeah, and we can hear you.
Okay, good. My concern with the Norden parcel is why, somebody may come up with a good use for other so-called industrial properties in the next year. Why should Norden be eliminated from that? Granted, it's a sort of a white elephant property. That nobody really knows what to do with. Even on the industrial zone, as I understand it, they haven't come up with a proposal on your study, Steve, on what to do with it, as far as I know, except for creating a new exit and entrance ramp there. So somebody will want it for some reason. That's my concern. I think rather than having sort of helter-skelter proposals coming up, if somebody comes up with a great idea and we residents of East Norwalk having to react to it, well, everything else is on moratorium. It seems to us that, if somebody can, use a different part of the city for what they're talking about, why not do that rather than, having it limited to just this one parcel?
Judy,
Yes.
can I'm sorry, I should have asked earlier. Can you identify yourself? Tell us your address.
Yes, I'm at 7 Pequot Drive in Norwalk.
Thank you.
All right. And I've been there at that address for 20 years, although I lived 8 years in West Norwalk too. And I've flown around the country since then, in between. All right, well, that's my point.
Thank you very much.
All right, next, I see Liz's hand up, but we'll go to Diane CC and then jump to Liz.
Good evening again, everyone. Diane CC, Olmsted Place. I'm speaking on behalf of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association and our board. So first off on this, I'll preface it by saying I don't think we made a formal public comment at the hearing last year, which started the first 12-month moratorium, but we certainly had communications and shared concerns with Mr. Kleppen as to the limited scope and timing of the first moratorium. Again, in general, it's concerning to residents and our board, certainly, when decisions are made ahead of taxpayer-funded studies. It seems counterintuitive to say we're going to pay for this study so that we can identify issues and address them. But ahead of that, we're going to take some steps that may or may not, be aligned with the conclusions of the study. And this is another example of that. Our concerns then are basically the same concerns we have now with your desire to extend this while the industrial zone study is still making its way through the process. The two concerns basically boil down to the fact that we felt that this should have been both expanded and extended. And I'll explain that. To the points that you just rose, that Mr. Kleppen just rose as well. This was limited to industrial 1 zones. And so when you're taking a look at industrial parcels within the city, we felt that it should have been, if you're looking to comply with the POCD's desire, then this should have been all of the industrial zones. Of course, you can imagine, because we're East Norwalk Neighborhood Association, we're very concerned with I-1 because of the amount of space it takes up in our small community and where it's located. But we also have the distinction of having the restricted industrial zone, AKA Norton Park, within our geography. At the time that we wanted everything that was in special permit to be included in this moratorium, if you were going to put it through, and not limit it to the ones that people didn't find objectionable, which was single and 2-family housing, and limiting it only to ones that people found objectionable, which was the contractor yards. Those were found objectionable because some of these other special permit uses simply weren't in place in the industrial 1 zone. And so you picked on just one item that may have meant something to the community, and then another one where people may not have had the same feeling of looking to block that type of residential in the interest of increased industrial and commercial use. So I'll give you some examples of the ones that could have been in place. They just happen not to be. But the fact of the matter is, you could get an application tomorrow morning for any one of the following uses in the restricted industrial zone, and they would not fall in this moratorium. And you'd be required to review it, and you'd be required to approve it if it met all the requirements of zoning, and you did your review of 13 kind of subjective criteria there. So for example, a municipal utility plant, gas stations, oil and petroleum storage plants, propane gas storage, asphalt and concrete plants, recycling operations, junkyards, solid waste transfer, hotels, helicopter landing sites. So we would suggest that under the study that's going on, any one of those uses probably would not fall into what the vision is under the POCD, or where even the consultants are starting to point out that some of these objectionable uses need to be removed altogether. So you have two components here. You have the component that suggests, and what we're asking for is that this moratorium should have been expanded to R1. And we realize that the public, at this hearing tonight, this has already been noticed, and so you can't modify this. But you certainly could delay a vote on it and renotice it and have a discussion on whether or not it should be expanded. Or you could vote on it to expand it tonight, I guess, and then maybe do another expansion of it. And not only should it be expanded to R1, it should be expanded at this point to block the application of any one of these special permits. Now, I hope you'll take this in the spirit that it's intended, commissioners, that I can't let tonight, pass me by without taking the opportunity to tell you that had staff done what we requested, and you would not have had the Norden application before you last year. The application didn't come in until after the moratorium was set. So if the moratorium had included R1 and included the special permit industrial uses that I just read to you, that application wouldn't have been received. Now, I realize that maybe some of you have some feelings that had it not been withdrawn, and perhaps it would have been approved. I don't know. I can't really speak to that. I honestly wish it would have come to a vote, but it was withdrawn. The point of the matter is that it wouldn't have ever come before you. And so now we're about to enter potentially another 12-month cycle, and I guess this could be lifted at any point as well, where now that application or any similar application or any of these other uses can come before you. And that's extremely concerning to the residents of East Norwalk. In fact, someone just said that they can't imagine, that something could come before you now that you'd want to consider. If you're talking about the R1 zone and you're talking about special permit, I really would like to hear from you, because I can't imagine what it would be. I'd like to hear from you which of those special permits you would consider and think that that might be a suitable application for Norden Park. And if you review the list and you say to yourself, probably none of it, including something that may seem innocuous as a small storage facility, then I think we need to reconsider this. I thought we had one bite at the apple last time and we missed it. And now with this extension, I hope that you'll reconsider. I will just want to take the opportunity, because I don't know what these letters were that came in. It may have come in at the prompting of ENNA to try to get some feedback from the community. But I can just read it to you briefly so that it goes on the record, and it's on this the record of this video as well, from ENNA. To the Zoning Commission, as you consider the 12-month extension of time on the I-1 zone, we urge you to ask staff to expand the moratorium to include East Norwalk's restricted industrial Norden Park, to prohibit acceptance of all special permit uses during this time, or until such time as you deem appropriate to lift the moratorium following the industrial zone study final recommendations. As you'll recall, because the current moratorium did not include the R1 zone, the city was forced to accept the application for Norden Place. Unless you impose a moratorium now in this location and similar uses, there is nothing to prevent the prior applicant or any other one to reapply for that or any other objectionable use in our residential neighborhood. And again, you can refer to that listing. In addition to the matter of Norden Park, we encourage you to at least consider that taxpayer dollars are funding the industrial zone study, and that it's not prudent to continue to accept applications until the study is substantially complete. Although we respect the rights of private property owners, the residents of East Norwalk look to your commission to make land use decisions that preserve, protect, and enhance the natural and historic assets, quality of life, and property values in our community. Please ask P&Z Director Steve Kleppen and staff to resubmit the extension request to include the R1 zone and a prohibition on all special permit applications in I1 and R1, and respectfully submitted by the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll go to Liz. Liz, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Thank you this evening for giving me the opportunity to share concerns of my industrial clients who continue to consider a moratorium on new and existing contractors' yards in the industrial number 1 zone. First, I'd like to share with you the fact that many of my industrial clients remain very concerned about a moratorium that is to be extended by you. As some of you have heard from last year's comments raised by myself, by Joe Seaman of JL Seaman, Brian Terzian of Terzian's Trucking, and FGB Construction, they have been members of this community for more than 40 years and have been a part of the fabric of Norwalk all that time. The extension of a moratorium continues to threaten their viability as ongoing concerns. These properly permitted and compliant businesses have been serving the city and its residents through the construction services and materials they provide, and they're at the heart of this industry. In fact, both the zoning staff and the building staff have approached the Board of Estimate and Taxation to request additional funding by virtue of, in response to the boom in construction that has occurred despite COVID. And these businesses are at the very core of that construction boom. As you know, the plan of development states that Norwalk's prosperity is rooted in retaining the foundation of its diversified economy, and varied businesses allow many Norwalk residents to work where they live, provide living wage jobs for all skill levels, and create a strong non-residential tax base. We ask you once again to reconsider extending a moratorium that relates to contractors' yards, particularly those who have been vibrant and active in the community, serve the community well, provide jobs, and pay substantial taxes to the city of Norwalk. And rather than impose an extended moratorium, that you perhaps either consider, one, allowing those existing contractor yard owners to move forward with plans they may have for the properties they own that they purchased with their savings, depending upon the stability of the zoning regulations that existed at the time. Or if that's not something you would like to consider, to instead reduce the extended time of the moratorium to a 6-month period. You have had a year to look at this. There's been a study that I understand is ongoing, and there will be regulations that will likely be promulgated and hearings that will be necessary. But by the end of the day, this will be a 2-year time period that many of these established businesses will be prevented from expanding their businesses or moving forward with plans for properties that they had contemplated using and developing all these years. Thank you for your time, and I wish that you would give consideration to this and some of the most very important property owners in Norwalk who provide services, employment, and a tax base for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anyone else would like to speak on this application, please use the raise your hand tool or dial *9. I think that's it, Lou.
Okay. We'll go back to Steve.
So this is the restricted, and it's the RI zone, not the R1 zone, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Here's the site plan allowed uses. So manufacturing, processing, R&D, public utility storage with some caveats, offices, and this was reflective in colleges. This was reflective of some prior uses. And here's the special permit uses. And so the prior application in Norton, obviously the one that drew all the public angst, was for a distribution facility. Personally, there is a clear distinction between a warehouse and a distribution facility, for example. Warehousing does not necessarily mean that there's trucks coming in and out all the time. Warehousing is storage. So there's a difference between the two. It's not self-storage, but it is warehousing. Yeah, I think no one would prefer to see an oil or petroleum facility there. A helicopter landing site. I don't know, maybe a commercial rec establishment on that site wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe there's a use that somebody is thinking of that could be interesting on that site. So I don't know if that's, that's something. Personally, I'm not in favor of residential on that site, just my opinion, based because it's one of such a unique property. I think that would be kind of a shame to put it there. But I mean, if that ever got subdivided into single family houses, I mean, just hypothetically, would that seems to be that you could say that's consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. But not saying I want to see that, but I'm saying that's something that could happen. And the other last use about the manufacturing of motor vehicles is I don't know if that would be objectionable or not. That's a pretty specific use that I imagine at one time there was a user that was looking at the site and tried to get that put in there. And then the last one, expansion of an existing package distribution facility. Since there isn't one on the site now, I don't think that would be of concern, at least for Norton. I don't know if there are any other ones on the RI areas that are along MLK. So, I mean, I think I would say, based on the timing of the existing moratorium, if you wanted to include other things in the moratorium, in the I-1 zone, we talked about self-storage and distribution is concerned. So if you wanted to include those, I would do that as a separate moratorium, just because you've already noticed this one with the current language, and this one has an expiration to it. So I would act on this separately. And if you wanted to discuss other items, we could bring that back at a later meeting and discuss that. So that's kind of my response.
Okay, thank you. Comments from commission members?
Well, I think, like I said, we should just move forward and deal with this extension of the moratorium and then deal with the other new items. And I guess later on.
I think it hasn't been presented before us, and I think we should deal with the current application.
Yes.
Remind me, Steve, yeah, I know you mentioned it before, but I'm blanking. Why 12 months for 6 months for this case? Or do you not have a short?
Yeah, so it's the first one was 12.
Yep.
12 gives us just more time. I think as Mr. Johnson had asked why 12 earlier on. I think, if we get, say the study is, wraps up June, July time period, then the next step is an amendment to the citywide plan. And that probably is going to take 3 months to get through, because it has to go through, starts with the planning commission. It then has to get referred to common council. I have to refer it out to Connecticut Deep, Harbor. I've got all these agencies that have to get referred to, even though it's a minor thing. So that's probably a 3-month process. Then we've got to look at this, while that's going on, we can have the zoning crafted, but then the zoning proposed text has to go through the process. And that's probably a 3 or 4 month process to get through. So by the time we get through, we're at 12 months. But if it happens in 10 months, then we just revise the language when that point.
When we're ready. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I do think there's something though, and I want to just, since Attorney Suchi spoke to this a little bit, I don't think you can hang this out forever. I hope that in 12 months from now, I realize there's a lot of legwork to be done, but I think we should be able to come to a resolution here, because I don't think it's fair to be indefinitely pushing things out, for years and years and years, considering there is an end goal here. So I do, Steve, I don't know, I mean, obviously I know that there's some level of guesswork here, but I think I would really hope that this is all completed, a year from now.
I don't see a reason why it wouldn't.
Steve, quick question. Is there any applicants, when Liz was speaking, she said there is a few business owners who are looking to expand their properties and so forth, and something like this would hurt them in the short term. Are you aware of any applicants currently waiting for this to expire? And if we extended it to a year, that it would possibly cause financial harm to them?
I am not aware of that. I mean, that you did receive testimony about at the hearing a year ago. Attorney Such had pointed out several people did speak about that. I know there were a couple of contractors that submitted I shouldn't say contractors, but applications for contractor yards that were submitted right before you enacted the moratorium in 2020. So, I think a few people that saw this coming got their ducks in a row and got their applications in, but I wasn't told that somebody said, hey, I'm going to do this in a year from now, so don't do it. I never spoke with anybody like a conversation like that.
I think we should keep in mind that these established businesses are still operating. It's having absolutely no impact on them. It's just future plans that they have, which is sort of a vague thing. They are currently operating and they're doing their business without interference.
One other thing, is there some way that we could put a collar on this, to Josh's point and a few others, where this doesn't lag forever? We give it one more extension and then, maybe limited after that, if any?
Well, Frank, when, excuse me, when the extension runs out, it can only be further extended by us. And I'm getting the feeling, and I think I agree, that we as a commission would not look favorably upon yet another extension of this. Any other comments before we close the hearing? All right, if not, consider the hearing closed. Excuse me, and we'll move on to action on the three hearings. I don't think we necessarily have to take them in the order in which we held them. I would suggest that we deal first with 2021-10 SB, Norwalk Housing Ventures 2 LLC, the One Elmcrest Terrace project. Is there a motion to approve or deny the applicant?
Put a motion to approve.
Okay, Frank moves to approve. Is there a second? And Josh seconds. Steve, Steve's putting up the motion.
Oh, get it. All right, let me know if you want me to scroll down. I'll move down.
Can you make it just a little bit larger, Brian?
Yeah.
Excuse me, thank you.
Oh, that made it worse, huh?
Okay. Now, there were two conditions that we wanted to add.
Yeah, so I added this
Go ahead.
highlighted one for the wall, if that is sufficient for you.
That's fine. And the second one is that the approval is subject to the DPW sign off.
Yep, so I got that one right here.
Okay.
Don't worry, oh my gosh.
Discussion on the motion? Anyone want to suggest why we should approve it, or?
Sure, I'll say something.
Go
I
ahead.
absolutely love the red door on that house that you're proposing.
Does anybody
and-
have a substantive reason why we should approve it? I mean, I think, you know, they've met the requirements. I wish they had perhaps gone a little bit further toward restoring the building beyond simply removing the fire escape, perhaps to the level that we saw in the East Wall Street building. But that's an entirely different project, and I'm sure that the finances, given the scale of the two projects, is different as well. I think they meet the requirements of the special permit with that's the reason I'm going to support this motion. Can we do a roll call on it? You have a motion and we have a second.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Witherspoon,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Mancini. That's a yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr.
Sorry.
Goldstein
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
That was unanimous.
Okay. Let's move on to the proposed text amendment to Article 101, which is 2021-12R zoning commission. This is the workforce housing regulations of the building zone regulations. Feedback from the members on this one? Do you wish to move forward? Do you wish to have further information or further discussion? Do you wish to deny it?
I think we should move forward.
Yeah, it seems to make sense to standardize across the city and then take up any substantive changes through the rewrites.
Okay.
That seems to be the prevalent pattern here. It makes sense.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Michael approves. There a second?
Second.
Okay, Galen seconds. Again, we should, all right, we have it up in front of us. Let's read it and then we'll move to vote.
The only thing I would say, I think Attorney Black made a good point about the use of the word value versus cost. I mean,
Yeah.
I should have brought this up before, but I think that makes sense.
Steve, is there any objection to changing that language?
No, that's fine. I'll make that change and there was that extra word unit in there that I'll delete that out.
Okay, and again, I just want to go on record as saying that I think that the charges we're talking about ought to extend to all construction within the city, and I hope that we'll be taking that up as part of the rewrite of the regulations. Any other suggested changes to the language here? Steve, anything that you want to reconsider, considering the comments?
No, I think to Attorney Goldstein's point, I think that it's the back end, the the process end that and I think it's fair that, we definitely need to get that wrapped up sooner rather than later. So that's the only thing that I'm going to make sure gets focused on over the next month or so to try to get a resolution. We found some models that from some other towns that have the fee in lieu option that where the
Right.
funds go and who can use those. So we'll start with those and come up with a solid plan.
Okay. Can we do a roll call?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Witherspoon,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mancini. Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
Sorry, my
Mr.
speaker, there's something wrong with it tonight.
Mr. Goldstein,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
Okay, also unanimous.
Okay. And finally, 1-20R zoning commission extension of 12-month moratorium on certain uses in the I-1 zone, including building material and storage yards, contractors' storage yards, and single and two-family dwellings. Can I have a motion on the draft resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Is that you, Josh? I'm sorry.
Yes.
And second, Michael, was that you?
Yes.
Okay. Michael seconds. Any discussion?
I think this probably makes sense, given where we are again with this study and whatnot. And given the impact and the negative impact that this can have on the neighbors and the community in that way. Although I do feel for the contractors who are trying to do more things, although the weight probably goes in the favor of the making sure it's the right thing to be done in those areas for the health of the community.
Okay. Any other comments?
I agree we should move forward and we can consider moratoriums of other zones at another time.
Yes. That's the right way to go.
Okay.
I
Roll
agree.
call. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying I concur with what they said.
Okay. Steve, roll call?
Sure. Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Witherspoon,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mancini,
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
Also unanimous. And I can, if you want, I don't know what the next meeting looks like. I'll put it on the agenda as a discussion item about the other moratorium items in the, whether it's the RI or the I-1 zone, whatever you want it to focus
Okay.
on, we can put that on.
The self-storage stuff, yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Review and action on pending, I'm sorry, on new applications. And that is.
Should have a
20
pending one left, Lou.
We got
Pardon
one
me?
left.
Should be a pending one left. Should be 480 Westport.
Oh, my apologies. Review and action on pending applications, 2021-14 SPR, WDG, Norwalk LLC, 480 Westport Avenue, intensification of existing restaurant use, report and recommend action. This is a site, as I recall, this is a site plan review. We have someone representing the applicant.
Yes, good evening. This is Colleen Berman with Foley Engineering, representing on behalf of WDG Norwalk LLC for the proposed Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen located at 480 Westport Ave in Norwalk. If it's okay, I'd like to share my screen to give a brief presentation of the application.
Sure.
All right. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So just for the record, my name is Colleen Byrne. I'm with Foley Engineering. Office is located at 501 Main Street, Monroe, Connecticut. And as I said before, representing WDG Norwalk LLC for the proposed Popeyes located at 480 Westport Avenue. We were here at your last meeting. Kevin Foley from my office gave a brief presentation. So I just want to kind of run through a more detailed overview of the proposed project and improvements that are part of our application. Next slide. There we go. So this is an aerial of the existing property. It was formerly a Burger King, a drive-through restaurant, and then most recently it was an Indian restaurant. The majority of the modifications that we're proposing under this application involve facade renovations to the building and signage improvements to meet the standard prototypical requirements for our Popeyes location. So over the last few weeks since our initial application, we've worked with WPCA and Transportation, Mobility, and Parking. And I believe to this point we have satisfied all of their comments. This is the site plan that was submitted as part of our application. The majority of the site improvements involve replacing the existing grease trap to bring that up to current standards. Everything else that's proposed, a couple signs for do not enter at the exit driveway, a clearance bar for the drive-through entrance, and new signage, which will be in the same location as existing for the Burger King, just upgraded to meet the Popeye standards. This is the architectural plan that was submitted. This is the interior floor plan, which just summarizes the proposed changes for the interior of the building. And then we have a couple elevations that were submitted also showing the proposed signage and building exterior finishes. These are the sides of the building, the east and west elevation. The proposed drive-through windows located about midway on the east elevation, similar to where it was when the Burger King was in operation. West elevation has a side entrance and facade renovations, as I mentioned before. This is the rear of the building, not much going on here, but again, we wanted to show what that's going to look like. And then the front of the building, facing Westport Avenue, a new cannon piece proposed. We have our main entrance here, the main Popeye signage at the top, and all of the signage that's proposed as part of this application is in compliance with the regulations. Also as part of this, which we know everybody had concerns regarding traffic, and there were some comments brought up at the last meeting regarding that. So we did prepare a traffic impact study, and that was satisfactory to the Department of Transportation, Mobility, and Parking. And based on some of the comments that came out of our last meeting, we know we went and actually looked at 2 additional Popeye sites in addition to the one that was studied to take observations on drive-through queuing during their existing peak periods of operation. So we wanted to make sure that we could, definitively say that what the queuing is at the other locations in Connecticut and tie that back to what we would expect to see at this location. So as part of the drive-through queue analysis, we looked at the location in Bridgeport, which is shown here on this aerial, also located along a major corridor roadway, multi-lane highway. And then we also looked at the location in Stratford, which is internal to a shopping center, but also, again, along a busy corridor roadway, similar to the characteristics of the roadway Westport Avenue where this site is proposed. And as we presented last time, we also observed queuing operations at the existing location on Connecticut Ave, which is adjacent to the existing Chick-fil-A up here in the right corner of my screen. And we know a lot of these drive-through queue concerns stem from the operations at Chick-fil-A. And, we can state with pretty much certainty that the observations that we made at this Popeyes and the other 3 Popeyes locations are not consistent with the drive-through queuing at the Chick-fil-A. And as part of our study, we evaluated actually at all 3 locations a maximum drive-through queue in any 10-minute increment that we studied during the lunch, Friday dinner, and Saturday midday peak hours with 6 vehicles. And this is our site, our proposed site at 480 Westport Avenue. There is a capacity for 19 vehicles of stacking through the existing site before we would get close to backing out into the adjacent roadway network, which is 3 times as much as the maximum that was observed at any of the other locations. So we're confident that this site has adequate capacity to support any drive-through queue that would be generated.
What is the,
So,
what is the interior capacity of this Popeyes for sit-down?
the seating capacity, yeah, 56 seats.
Okay. I mean, we're getting certainly closer to a point where people will feel comfortable doing that.
Exactly, and then in that situation, we would expect that those drive-through queue lengths would be even shorter once people are able to use indoor seating once again. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Questions from anyone? I see a lot of people shaking their heads.
I'm excited. That's down the road from there. And it'll save the Popeyes route going all the way down the Post Road Street.
Any other comments?
Not for me.
All right. Well, if there are no other comments, this is just a site plan review that we need to approve. Am I correct about that, Steve? A
Yep.
simple, straightforward vote?
Yep, you're correct.
Okay. Motion to approve the site plan review?
Motion.
Frank, Frank moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Nick.
Nick should second. He's the one who wants to eat there.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Nick seconds. Again, let's do a roll call on this.
All right, I'll do the roll call. Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mancini,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein.
Yes.
Did we lose Michael? Might have lost Michael. Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
Yep, I'm sorry, I was frozen for a second. Michael had to leave at 9, he said.
Okay.
Okay. All right, motion passes. Now we move on to review and action on new application 2021-15 CAM SPR Van Zant Apartments LLC, 12 Van Zant Street. Demolition of existing structure to construct 5-unit multifamily residence. Someone representing Van Zant Apartments?
Believe it, is it? I believe Miss Attorney Suchi is.
Well, Attorney Suchi has her hand raised. Ah, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't join by video for whatever reason, but I'm sure that's not a problem for all of you not to see me for a couple more minutes. There we go. I can stay blank if you'd prefer, whatever your preference is. There we go. Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time this evening. My name is Liz Suchi. I'm a partner at Carmody, Torrance, Sand Neck, and Hennessy. I represent the owner of the property, Van Zant Apartments, LLC. Present this evening is Dean Martin, who is the project engineer, and he's the principal of Grumman Engineering. Bill Andriopoulos and Maria Genovese of Andriopoulos Design Associates, the project architects, and Greg Del Rio of Hardesty and Hanover, who's the traffic consultant. There are 2 applications that were filed in connection with this 5-unit redevelopment of the site. One is a site plan application and one is a coastal area management short form. It is a coastal area management short form application because the property is within the far reaches of the coastal area management zone. And that is a specific distance from a coastal resource. And in this instance, it's the Norwalk River, Norwalk Harbor. Notification was sent to neighbors via certificate of mailing on April 23rd. And we did send that certificate of mailing back to staff, and it should be in the file. The applicant is Van Zandt Apartments LLC, 12 Van Zandt Street, District 3, Block 36, Lot 13. It is in the neighborhood business zone, and as I said, within the far reaches of the CAM zone. The lot is just over 10,000 square feet and is currently improved with single-family residence and detached garage that were constructed in, I guess, late 1800s. My client submitted the pre-application demolition application to the building department back in August. And to the best of my knowledge, that was referred to the Historical Commission, who did not deem it appropriate or necessary for this demolition request to be put before them for further review. So I take from that that the structure does not have any real historical or architectural significance. The proposal, as was indicated, is to demolish the house and the garage and to construct in its place a new structure that will be a 5-unit multifamily development. All of the units will be 2 bedrooms and 1.5 baths, 2-car garages underneath the structure. The entirety of the project complies with all requirements, height and bulk requirements of the neighborhood business zone, including setbacks, coverage, building height, number of parking spaces, backup parking aisle dimension, recreation area, open space. No variances are required for this application, and it meets all the requirements of the neighborhood business zone as well as the coastal zone. There are 2 street trees proposed in front of the property, in front of the new building, and a stormwater system designed by Dean Martin, which he'll describe in just a couple of minutes, is under review by the Department of Public Works. And we've received some very basic comments from them and will respond to them. So far, the SEAC sign-offs that have been received with the Harbor Management Commission, they met the end of April and recommended approval. Transportation, mobility, and parking have shared some comments, and those will be incorporated into revised plans. And that relates to the width of the sidewalks and the fact that in this area, granite curbs are required, and those will be implemented on the plans. We're awaiting Public Works, water pollution control, First District, water, and the Health Department sign-offs. Lastly, we did receive fire department sign off last week. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dean Martin. He can walk you through the site plan, and then followed up by Bill Andriopoulos, and bringing up the rear, Greg Del Rio of Hardesty and Hanover.
There you
Dean
go.
Martin.
Dean Martin with Grumman Engineering. Let me pull up my site plan. This was, as stated by Attorney Suchi, the proposal is for the demolition of existing dwellings or existing buildings on the property and construction of a new 5-unit residential building, which will be right here, placed along the eastern side of the property. With a new
Mr. Martin, we can't see your plans. Are you trying to share?
Yes. Let me try again. Can you see that at all?
No, I'm sorry, we can't.
Dean, what are you trying to pull up? I can see if
I'm pulling up my site plan.
I can share that. Let's try. Yeah, it's not allowing me as well.
There we go.
There, okay. Do you have it now?
Yes, now we do.
All right, well, this is actually the landscape plan. But this is the site. It's on the south side of Van Zandt Avenue. The proposal is to remove the existing buildings which are located here with a driveway on the eastern side of the existing buildings, construct a new 5-unit residential building with a new driveway, which would be down here on the western side of the property. This building will be connected to sanitary sewer, water and gas off from Van Zandt Street. There will be a stormwater management system consisting of 20 24-inch precast concrete galleys, which are sized to receive runoff from the roof area as well as approximately 85% of the driveway. And those will provide stormwater retention for the 2 through 100-year design storms. As mentioned, there will be 2 proposed street trees located adjacent to the sidewalk on Van Zandt Street. And we're proposing plantings of arborvitaes to be placed along the perimeter of the site on the south end, adjacent to the residential areas, as well as on the southeastern portion of the property. Recreation area would be located in the this is going to be lawn area. This would be the recreation area. There were some minor comments received from the Traffic and Mobility Division of Department of Public Works. Those being that the sidewalk, which was originally proposed as a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk, should be a 7-foot wide because this property is in the urban district, and that change has been made on this plan, as well as the curbing, which they had noted should be granite, which I believe was already shown on my site plan as granite curbing. So those comments have been addressed. We have sediment erosion control in the form of siltation fencing placed around the perimeter of the site, anti-tracking pad at the entrance of the proposed work area. There will be some small lights placed over the garage door at the entrance of for each unit. That's going to be the only proposed lighting on the property or on the project. Those lights will be pointed down and will be shaded, so there will be no light intrusion onto any of the onto the adjacent property to the west. I think that covers the engineering portion of the project.
If anyone has any questions or comments for Mr. Martin, we'd be happy to answer them. Or any for me, of course.
Liz, we received a letter from the adjoining neighbor. There is currently apparently a shared driveway that's used by both properties. And I guess that driveway will no longer be a shared driveway under this development. I'm not sure there's anything that's something we need to address, but I'm curious to know whether there have been any discussions between this property owner and I think it's Mr. Taylor, who owns the clockery next door.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my client has been in touch with Mr. Taylor, but I also have to call to your attention that Mr. Taylor has his own independent driveway on the other side of the building that he owns on Van Zandt Street. So it is not as if this will eliminate access by him to the rear of his property and the rear of the building. There is an existing driveway, and frankly, it appears to be slightly larger than the driveway that my Taylor has provided Mr. Taylor with permission to use to gain access to the rear. But you're right, this is not a zoning issue. It really is an issue between private property owners, but there have been discussions and conversations between my client and Mr. Taylor.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. At this point, I'd like to have Bill Andriopoulos or Maria Genovese join the call and present the architectural plan, the floor plans. And if Dean, you could remove this screen from the, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. We're going to try and share our screen as well. And I won't keep you. It's the units are approximately 1,000 square feet. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, and it looks as if.
Okay. So
there, you're sharing the screen.
Right. So we're going to just run you through a typical unit, and they obviously repeat, you know, down and flip. They mirror image each other down the line. So as you can see, unit number one is the street facing unit facing Van Zandt, and so you have your 2-car garage. And in addition to that, you have a man door to come in and out. So you're not always opening and closing your garage door when you want to go outside from the garage. And then there's, you know, a window and a door facing Van Zandt Street. We did that to give this first floor unit, this first floor level, you'll see when you see the elevations, you know, an appearance of the entrance to the unit. Then there's a door that goes upstairs to the first floor, and you come up through. This is actually the second floor. This is the half story. I'm gonna find our first floor unit. Our second floor. No, that's the elevations. I think it's just got to scroll over. Right. There it goes. Okay, so again, unit number one is on the left of your screen, and you enter the unit through the kitchen from the garage level. It's a L-shaped kitchen with a little open dining area and a bay window, and then your living room, a half bathroom, and a closet, stairs that goes upstairs to your bedroom suite. So at the top of the stairs, you've got a closet, a hall bath, and 2 bedrooms. That bedroom down at the end, you know, is serviced with windows, dormer windows, you know, east and west on the unit. And then your front elevation this is your elevation facing the street. Again, that's your garage on the first floor, your kitchen and living room level on the second floor, and then the half story are the 2 bedrooms and bath. And then your garage elevation on the driveway side shows that entry door, your garage door, and then it repeats. The lower level will be clad with a faux stone veneer. The siding is a vinyl siding, PVC siding with PVC trim, vinyl windows, vinyl clad windows, and asphalt shingles. Now, there were a couple comments from the staff about they felt the facade was flat. So what we had done was I have a sketch that I had done for the owner to convince him that, you know, maybe we would add a roof structure over the door, and then on that lower level window for the garage, we clad that with the panel trim on the bottom and on the header. And, you know, again, just kind of add a little more definition and shadow to the front elevation. And from the side, you know, you can see on the front elevation that the bay window does, you know, provide some relief to that wall plane by sticking out, and the 3-foot door, you know, overhang over the front entry will also give it some shadow. There's an overhang over the garage doors with the second floor, or actually the second floor, which will also provide, you know, shadow. And then the roof structures, they're mostly dormers, you know, they provide relief as well. So I hope that that will satisfy them in that regard. That's basically our presentation. Can
There are any questions for Bill of Andriopolis Design Associates? I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them.
The first floor here, like this hatching, is this brick or stone?
I didn't hear the question.
Ms. Wells, it's Maria Genovese here. Yes, that's stone on the first floor here that we're proposing. It reads better on the digital elevation. It's stone on that first floor where the garage level is. It's better, the first floor is partly, concrete, so we wanted to make sure it had a nice textural difference between, and also nice and appealing on the street facade as well.
I see.
So we added some faux stone, the stone veneer, and then we'll have the clapboard above.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
Okay, hearing none. Greg, would you take them through your traffic analysis and findings, please?
Sure. Good evening, all. So pretty straightforward on the traffic and transportation. We're on State Route 136. And it's a 2-lane road, 1 lane in each direction. Parking on one side adjacent to the property, with currently is restricted to half-hour parking, 30 minutes maximum. There's currently 2 units existing. They'll be demolished and replaced with 5 units, so an increment of 3 units. The 5 units generates about 3 trips in the peak hour. So very few trips with this type and size of a development, which will result in no measurable impacts to traffic or traffic operations along Van Zandt or the adjacent streets. That's pretty quick findings on the traffic end.
And a traffic study by Hardesty and Hanover was submitted as part of the application, along with a brief analysis of the limited coastal resources, which are considered general resources, and the coastal policies, which are also general development policies. That analysis was provided by Grumman Engineering, and that's part of the file as well, along with a stormwater management report and a maintenance report, maintenance operational procedural document as well. One other thing I just wanted to note for you, I did receive calls from 2 property owners who are, I believe, who live on Betts behind the property. They inquired about construction activities, hours of construction. One property owner requested that if possible, if in fact this is approved and construction commences, that existing landscaping that may be removed from the front and not used on the site, if that property owner might be able to take that landscaping and put it on her property. And my client is certainly amenable to that, having that discussion. Another property owner had indicated a concern about construction activities, time of day, noise, compliance with noise ordinance, and we certainly will comply with all ordinances related to construction and construction activities as they relate to noise. And lastly, there was also a concern raised about when and if this is approved and demolition commences, that sometimes demolition uncovers rodents and other things that exist in buildings. And my client has made it abundantly clear that he will conduct a pre-demolition rodent inspection by a qualified extermination company, so that would not be a concern of neighbors. Those are the only questions and comments that were raised to me. If you have any other questions of Greg or Dean, Bill or Maria, we're certainly happy to answer them, but that will conclude our presentation for this evening.
Okay, I know the staff had some concerns. Have those been adequately addressed?
I think so. I've liked the rendering of, I think they solved the problem of the flattish facade and any other concerns we had.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I believe what we need here is approval of the site plan and the CAM requirements in order to move this project forward. Can I have such a motion? I'm sorry. Did someone make the motion?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Galen. Is there a second? Okay, Josh seconds the motion. Any questions from the commission members regarding the project? All right, if not, we'll go to a roll call.
Okay, where are we? Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein, and Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous.
Okay, did you ask Mr. Mancini or did I miss that?
Oh, he's his video's off. That's why I didn't ask him. I didn't see him. Are you still with us, Mr. Mancini? I think we'll have to count him as an abstention or not voting at all.
Okay.
I'm not sure where he is.
Okay. The motion passes. All right, we have a number of discussion items. It is getting late, so let's see if we can move these quickly. The industrial zone study status report, Steve.
I'll send the link out to the
Haiku.
video. That there's nothing else for me to go over.
South Norwalk TOD study status report. There's really nothing there either. There hasn't been a meeting since our last meeting, so there's frankly nothing new to report. The zoning regulation rewrite.
Nothing new to report there. The consultant's just digesting a lot of information, so it's going to be a little bit of time before they're up to speed.
Okay. At what point do we as a commission meet with them?
That's so I'll get back to you on that. I know that they want to do interviews with, everybody on the zoning commission, planning commission, and some other, I think, planning committee of council as well. And they're looking to do that in June, so next month sometime. So I have to start getting that set up.
Okay. Discussion of the housing bills. We talked about this at our last meeting. I have subsequently sent an email to Stephanie Thomas to open a conversation with her. I sent it, I think it was Monday. Have not yet heard back from her. But when I do, I am hoping to have a conversation with her, particularly on the 1024. Now, she doesn't sit on the housing committee. I think she's on transportation, a couple of others. So I don't know how familiar she'll be with it, but I'll certainly share with everyone what she has to say. If it's not close to our next meeting, I'll do it through a memo that I'll ask Steve to send out to everyone. So everyone's kept
Note that
praised.
Lou, Bob Duff is really very close to these regulations. It might be worthwhile to talk to Bob Duff as well.
Well, the
he's
meeting
come out in support of the bill.
Yeah, he's come out in support of
Right.
the bill, but see why he's in support of the bill.
The
Yeah,
meeting,
absolutely.
the meeting we had with the mayor's office and staff included a representative from Duff's office. If you think it would be helpful, I'll contact Bob and have a conversation with him as well.
No, I think it would be.
I have no problem with that.
There are so many misconceptions about this bill in the press, and so many people are up in arms about things that really aren't in the bill. I think it might be helpful.
Yeah, there's the original version, there's the current version, and they're trying to get provisions of the original version back into the current version. So I think that's where some of the concern lies.
Right. Make myself a note. Okay.
Back.
I'll contact his office tomorrow. Discussion of East Norwalk TOD.
So yeah, it's about 9:30, so I'll leave it up to you how you want to proceed. I sent you the TPUDC evaluation report, as well as the appendix that was part of the East Norwalk TOD plan and the draft zoning that's in response to that. So I don't know if you want to go through it, how detailed you want to get, or just high level. I'm not sure what your pleasure is at 9:30.
Yeah, has everyone had an opportunity to review those materials?
Somewhat.
Steve, maybe for this meeting, it would make more sense just to get the high-level overview. And perhaps we can discuss it in more detail at our next meeting.
Sure. Yep, that's no problem. So I'll go way back up, way high level. So we did the East Norwalk TOD plan, which was adopted sometime last year, last fall, I believe. As part of that, we amended the citywide plan to incorporate the recommendations within the East Norwalk TOD plan, similar to what we talked about tonight with what we would do with the industrial zone study. So as part of the TOD plan, there was a pretty vetted and I'd say pretty thorough set of draft zoning that was put forward as part of that. There were some concerns, obviously there were some concerns from the residents, but there was concerns when it got to the planning commission and also, planning committee, and also as part of common council about certain items being looked at more carefully. They wanted, for example, one big item they talked about was making sure that, for lack of a better term, like green initiatives, sustainable measures were more of a requirement than as part of the menu of amenity bonuses that could be achieved. They wanted that to be more standard fare. So we adjusted the zoning to require that. And I want to look at it a little more. That what I showed you was just kind of first cut at that. I want to think it through. There were a few items that the consultant firm recommended adding as similar amenities that I don't have fully laid out yet in terms of some of the diagrams and the square footages that proposed. So we can adjust that in the next couple of weeks. I'll give you another draft. Another item they wanted us to look at was making sure that the parking would work. There were some concerns about that. So we've looked at that as well and made some modifications to that. So all in all, the big thematic proposals as part of the zoning don't change, but just getting down to the fine details of hopefully where it's a workable document and it's something we can move forward.
Okay. I think it would be helpful to go over all of that in more detail. When is our next meeting?
The 19th.
Okay, May 19th.
And I believe you're going to have the Brian McMahon special permits application back on about the lights. So my guess is it's quite possible that could be a long meeting based on the neighbors coming out, plus all the softball parents coming out screaming at you. So have fun with that.
So let's limit the agenda then.
Yeah, exactly.
At least it'll be a Zoom meeting. If people get out of control, we can just mute them. Next item, approval of minutes of the April 21st meeting. Can I have a motion?
I move.
Nick moves.
I'll second.
Rod seconds. Thank you. All those in favor, just raise your hands. Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Minutes are approved. And finally, motion to adjourn. Okay, Josh makes the motion. Is there a second?
We'll all raise our hands to second.
I had a quick question.
Everybody seconds. Steve, unless there are some final words, we're going to adjourn.
If real quick, I forgot to ask before, for those of you who, I know Lou was on the meeting, for those who attended last Thursday's meeting, if you have any thoughts, positive, negative, let me know.
Let you know offline, like,
Either way, if you want to go now, that's fine.
well,
Please go ahead, Galen.
no, I didn't really have anything that specific. I didn't really learn that much. I felt like it really went over the surface. But I don't know that that's a criticism.
I thought it was good to have the review. I think that's always helpful so that you can keep top of mind what the importance of what we're doing and the seriousness with which we need to approach it. So I appreciate it. I also appreciate the fact that it wasn't too long.
Yes.
All right. If that's it, we're adjourned.
Take care, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Right.
Good night.
Have a good